England, 1809. For some, death arrives as a whisper, but Catherine Wexford would remember it as the deafening crack of ancient timber surrendering to rain and time. The carriage had been rattling along the secondary road near the River Severn for hours, the spring storm transforming the usually tranquil journey into something far more treacherous. Inside the cramped interior, Catherine Wexford adjusted the woolen blanket across her aunt's frail shoulders, watching as Lady Margot Fenimore's breathing grew more laboured with each passing mile. "We should have postponed the journey," Catherine murmured, her voice barely audible above the thunder rolling across the darkening sky. At 27, she had learned to speak her concerns quietly, a habit formed from years of being told her opinions held little value. Lady Margot's eyes opened, pale blue and rheumy with age. "Nonsense, child. The physicians in Bath have been expecting us these 3 weeks. My health will not improve by remaining in that draughty house in London." Her thin hand reached out, patting Catherine's with surprising firmness. "Besides, you worry too much. Always have." Across from them, Lucy, the young maid Lady Margot had insisted accompany them, gripped the leather strap near the window, her knuckles white beneath her gloves. She was perhaps 18, with a round face that betrayed her country upbringing, and wide brown eyes that now reflected mounting anxiety. "Begging your pardon, my lady," Lucy ventured, her voice trembling slightly, "but the storm seems to be worsening. Perhaps we might stop at the next village until it passes." Before Lady Margot could respond, the carriage lurched violently to the right. Catherine heard the coachman's shout of alarm, cut short by a sound that would haunt her nightmares for years to come. The grinding crack of wood splintering beneath tremendous weight, followed by the sensation of falling. Time fractured into terrible fragments. The carriage tilted sharply. Catherine's stomach dropped as they plunged downward. Lady Margot's scream. Lucy's hand clutching desperately at the seat. The explosive crash as the vehicle struck icy water. Then darkness, and cold beyond anything Catherine had ever imagined. The River Severn in April was merciless. Catherine surfaced, gasping, her lungs burning as she tried to orient herself in the churning chaos. The carriage had broken apart on impact with the water, pieces of it spinning in the current. Rain pelted her face, mixing with river water as she struggled to stay afloat, her heavy travelling dress dragging her downward. "Aunt Margot!" she screamed, spinning in the water. "Lucy!" A flash of pale fabric caught her eye. Lady Margot's body floated face down several yards away, motionless. Catherine tried to swim toward her, but something held her fast. Looking down through the murky water, she saw with rising horror that her left foot was trapped between 2 pieces of the shattered carriage, the wood pinning her ankle as effectively as any iron shackle. Panic seized her. She pulled, twisted, her hands clawing at the debris, but the current only pressed the wreckage more firmly against her. The cold was already numbing her limbs, making her movements sluggish. Water filled her mouth as a wave crashed over her head. She surfaced again, coughing, her strength fading rapidly. "This is how I die," she thought with strange clarity. Alone in the Severn, trapped like an animal. At least it would be quick. She was sinking again, her struggles growing weaker when strong hands seized her beneath the arms. Catherine's head broke the surface, and she found herself staring into eyes of startling blue intensity, set in a face that radiated determination and command. "Stop fighting!" a deep voice ordered, the authority in it cutting through her panic. "I have you. Be still." The man holding her was tall, powerfully built, with dark hair plastered to his head by rain and river water. He wore the clothes of a gentleman, though his coat was already discarded, his white shirt clinging to broad shoulders as he worked to support her weight against the current. "My foot!" Catherine managed to gasp. "Trapped!" He nodded once, his expression hardening with focus. Deep breath. Now, before she could protest, he released her for a heart-stopping moment, diving beneath the surface. Catherine felt his hands on her ankle, felt the pressure of the debris shift. The pain was excruciating as he worked to free her, but suddenly her foot pulled loose. She kicked upward, breaking the surface just as the man emerged beside her. "Hold on to me," he commanded, wrapping one powerful arm around her waist. Do not let go. Catherine obeyed, too weak to do otherwise, as he pulled them both toward the riverbank with strong, efficient strokes. The distance seemed impossible, the current fighting them at every turn, but gradually the bank drew closer. She felt stones beneath her feet, felt him lifting her bodily from the water, carrying her up onto solid ground before laying her carefully on the muddy bank. Breathe, he ordered, turning her onto her side as water poured from her mouth. Catherine coughed violently, her body convulsing as she tried to clear her lungs. When the worst of it passed, she looked up to see him already scanning the river, his expression grim. My aunt, Catherine croaked. Lady Margot, and Lucy, our maid. Where? His voice was clipped, urgent. Catherine pointed with a shaking hand toward where she had last seen her aunt's body. Without hesitation, the man plunged back into the churning water. Catherine watched, helpless, as he fought his way to Lady Margot's floating form. He turned her over, and even from the bank Catherine could see the terrible stillness of her aunt's face. The man checked for breath, for a pulse, his hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone trained in such matters. After a long moment, his shoulders sagged slightly. He gathered Lady Margot's body in his arms with unexpected gentleness, swimming back toward the bank. I am sorry, he said quietly as he laid the elderly woman beside Catherine. She was gone before I could reach her. Catherine stared at her aunt's peaceful face, the rain washing away the river water that clung to her grey hair. No, she whispered, though she knew it was true. No, please. Miss Catherine! The cry came from downstream. Catherine's head snapped up to see Lucy clinging to a fallen tree branch that extended into the water, her face pale with terror, but alive, blessedly alive. The man was already moving, running along the bank to reach the girl. Within moments, he had pulled Lucy to safety, the young maid collapsing onto the muddy ground, sobbing with relief and shock. The coachman, Catherine managed to say, her teeth beginning to chatter violently. Where is he? The man's expression answered before his words did. His neck broke in the fall. Death would have been instant. Catherine felt the world beginning to spin, the cold and shock finally overwhelming her. She tried to stand, to go to Lucy, but her legs would not obey. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the stranger's face. Those intense blue eyes filled with concern as he caught her before she hit the ground. When consciousness returned, Catherine found herself lying on something soft, a blanket tucked around her shivering body. The sound of rain had diminished to a steady patter against windows. She opened her eyes to discover she was in a small but clean room, a fire crackling in the hearth nearby. The smell of wood smoke and damp wool filled her nostrils. You are awake. Good. The voice belonged to her rescuer. Catherine turned her head carefully to see him standing near the window, now dressed in dry clothes that marked him as a man of considerable wealth. His dark hair was combed back from his face, revealing sharp, aristocratic features. He was perhaps 34, with an air of command that suggested he was accustomed to being obeyed. Where am I? Catherine's voice came out as a hoarse whisper. The King's Arms, an inn in Thornbury Village. It was the closest shelter. He moved closer, studying her with those penetrating blue eyes. The physician has examined you. Bruising, shock, and exhaustion, but nothing that will not heal with rest. Lucy, the maid is safe. She has minor injuries only. She is sleeping in the next room. Catherine closed her eyes briefly, relief washing through her. And my aunt? I have arranged for Lady Margot Fenimore's body to be kept in the inn's cellar until proper arrangements can be made. The coachman as well. His voice softened fractionally. I am deeply sorry for your loss. The kindness in his tone, so at odds with his severe demeanour, threatened to break through Catherine's carefully maintained composure. She swallowed hard, forcing back the tears that burned behind her eyes. There would be time for grief later. Now, she needed to understand what had happened. The bridge, she said. What caused it to collapse? The Severn Bridge has been neglected for years, he replied, his expression darkening with anger. The timber was rotted through. It should have been repaired or replaced long ago. I have already sent word to the local magistrate demanding an investigation. Who are you? Catherine asked, suddenly aware that this man had saved her life, had risked his own life to attempt saving her aunt, and she did not even know his name. He hesitated for the briefest moment, as though considering how much to reveal. Alexander Greymore, Duke of Ashbourne. I was returning from my estates in the north when I came upon the bridge just as your carriage crossed. I saw it give way. A duke. Catherine felt heat rising to her cheeks despite the chill that still gripped her bones. Your Grace, I do not have adequate words to thank you for what you did. You saved my life. And Lucy's. Any man of honor would have done the same, he replied, though something in his expression suggested he was not entirely comfortable with her gratitude. You are Miss Catherine Wexford, I understand. Lady Margot's niece. Yes. Catherine struggled to sit up, and immediately the Duke moved forward, his hand steadying her shoulder. Do not exert yourself. You nearly drowned. I am well aware of that fact, Your Grace. Despite everything, a hint of spirit crept into Catherine's voice. Though I am grateful for your concern, I am not made of porcelain. I will recover. For the first time, something that might have been approval flickered across the Duke's austere features. I do not doubt it, Miss Wexford. You fought admirably in the water. Many would have simply surrendered. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. A grey-haired man entered, carrying a black bag that marked him as the local physician. Ah, Miss Wexford, you are conscious. Excellent. I am Dr. Harlow. How are you feeling? Cold, tired, but alive, thanks to His Grace. Dr. Harlow glanced at the Duke with poorly concealed curiosity before turning his attention back to Catherine. You were fortunate indeed. Another few minutes in that water, and the outcome would have been quite different. I want you to remain in bed for at least 2 days. The shock to your system has been considerable. 2 days? Catherine's mind raced. But I have no funds for such an extended stay. Lady Margot was to pay for our lodgings in Bath. I do not know if she carried sufficient coin for— The accommodations have been secured, the Duke interrupted firmly. You need not concern yourself with such matters. Catherine's spine stiffened. Your Grace, I cannot accept such charity. It would not be proper. What would not be proper, Miss Wexford, is for you to worry about finances while recovering from a near-death experience. His tone left no room for argument. Consider it settled. The physician wisely chose that moment to examine Catherine more thoroughly, checking her breathing and the bruising on her ankle where the debris had trapped her. When he finished, he nodded with satisfaction. You will heal well, provided you rest. I shall return tomorrow to check on your progress. He gathered his bag and departed, leaving Catherine alone once more with the Duke. I should see Lucy, Catherine said, though exhaustion was already pulling at her again. She must be terrified. The girl is sleeping soundly. The innkeeper's wife has been looking after her. The Duke moved toward the door, then paused. Rest now, Miss Wexford. Tomorrow will bring enough difficulties without you collapsing from exhaustion. As the door closed behind him, Catherine lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling. The events of the day replayed in her mind like scenes from a nightmare. Lady Margot's still face, the terrible cold of the water, the strength in the Duke's arms as he pulled her to safety. And now she was stranded in a village inn, without resources, without her aunt, without any clear path forward. Lady Margot had been her last refuge after her father's death had left the family destitute. With her gone, Catherine had nothing and no one. The tears she had been holding back finally came, silent and bitter. She wept for her aunt, for the coachman whose name she had never learned, for the life that had been so brutally disrupted. And she wept for herself, for the uncertain future that stretched ahead like a dark and unmarked road. Outside, the storm gradually spent itself, leaving behind only the steady drip of water from the eaves and the distant sound of the river that had nearly claimed her life. The morning following the accident dawned grey and sombre over Thornbury village. Catherine woke to the sound of church bells tolling in the distance, each peal a reminder of death and loss. Her body ached in places she had not known could hurt, the bruising along her ribs and ankle a colourful testament to her ordeal in the Severn. Lucy appeared at her bedside within moments of her stirring, the young maid's face still pale, but determined. "Miss Catherine, you are awake. I have brought tea and some bread. The innkeeper's wife says you must eat to regain your strength." "Thank you, Lucy." Catherine accepted the simple meal, noting how the girl's hands trembled slightly as she poured the tea. "How are you faring? You were in that water as well." "I am well enough, miss." Lucy's brown eyes filled with tears. "But poor Lady Margot, and that coachman, Mr. Peters, he had a wife in London, miss. 3 children. The information struck Catherine like a physical blow. She had not known the coachman's name, had never thought to ask during the countless journeys Lady Margot had taken with him at the Rains. Now he was dead, and his family would be left destitute without his wages. "Has anyone sent word to his family?" Catherine asked quietly. "His Grace the Duke has seen to it, miss. He has arranged for Mrs. Peters to receive compensation, and has paid for Mr. Peters's body to be transported back to London for proper burial." Of course he had. The Duke of Ashbourne seemed to be a man who managed everything with quiet efficiency, expecting no thanks and accepting no refusal. Catherine found herself both grateful and unsettled by such decisive action. The door opened after a brief knock, revealing the Duke himself. He was dressed impeccably in a dark coat and buff breeches, his cravat tied with mathematical precision. In the light of day, Catherine could better appreciate the sharp planes of his face, the strong jaw and high cheekbones that spoke of generations of aristocratic breeding. "Miss Wexford, I trust you are feeling improved." His blue eyes swept over her, with the detached assessment of someone evaluating a problem to be solved. "Yes, Your Grace. Dr. Harlowe's prediction seems accurate. I am sore but recovering." Catherine set aside her teacup, suddenly conscious of her appearance. She wore a borrowed nightgown, her chestnut hair hanging in a simple braid over one shoulder, entirely inappropriate attire for receiving a gentleman caller, let alone a duke. If the Duke noticed the impropriety, he gave no indication. "I have received a response from Lady Margot's solicitor in London. He will arrive tomorrow to discuss her affairs." Her affairs? Catherine's stomach tightened with apprehension. Her will, among other matters. The Duke's expression remained carefully neutral. "I took the liberty of sending an express message immediately after the accident. Given your situation, I thought it best not to delay." Catherine nodded slowly, understanding dawning with cold clarity. Lady Margot had been her sole means of support for the past 3 years. Whatever the will contained would determine her immediate future. "That was very thoughtful, Your Grace, though I fear I am proving an expensive inconvenience." "You are neither expensive nor an inconvenience, Miss Wexford." A hint of something sharp entered his tone. "You are a woman who nearly died through no fault of your own. Any gentleman would do the same." Lucy, who had been standing quietly near the window, cleared her throat softly. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but I should help Miss Catherine dress. It is not proper for you to be here while she is abed." For the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered across the Duke's austere features. "Your maid is quite correct, Miss Wexford. I shall return this afternoon. There are matters regarding the bridge collapse that require my attention in the village." After he departed, Lucy helped Catherine into one of the plain dresses that had been salvaged from the wreckage. Most of their belongings had been lost to the river, but a few items had been recovered downstream by local villagers. "He is very handsome, is he not, miss?" Lucy ventured as she fastened the buttons along Catherine's spine. "And so commanding. Like something from one of those novels Lady Margot used to read. He is a duke, Lucy. Dukes are meant to be commanding." Catherine kept her voice light, though she could not deny the truth of the girl's observation. There was something compelling about Alexander Greymore, something beyond his obvious physical attractiveness. Perhaps it was the intensity with which he approached every task, or the unexpected gentleness he had shown when laying Lady Margot's body on the riverbank. The solicitor arrived the following day, as promised, a thin man with spectacles and a grave demeanour that suggested he bore unwelcome news. Catherine received him in the inn's small parlour, Lucy hovering protectively nearby. The Duke had also been invited to attend, his presence lending an air of formality to the proceedings. Miss Wexford, the solicitor began, consulting the papers before him. I am Mr. Graves, Lady Margot's man of business these 20 years. First, allow me to express my deepest condolences on your loss. Thank you, Mr. Graves. Now, as to the matter of Lady Margot's will. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. I regret to inform you that the entirety of her estate has been left to her nephew, Mr. Timothy Fenimore. The name meant nothing to Catherine for a moment, then memory stirred. Timothy Fenimore was Lady Margot's brother's son, a man Catherine had met perhaps twice in her life. Both occasions had been marked by his poorly concealed disdain for his aunt's reduced circumstances and her charity case of a niece. I see. Catherine kept her voice steady through sheer force of will. And did Lady Margot leave no provision for her servants, or for any debts she might have owed? There is a small bequest for her long-time housekeeper in London, but beyond that, no. I am sorry, Miss Wexford. Mr. Graves looked genuinely distressed. I advised her ladyship on several occasions to update her will, particularly after you came to reside with her. But she was always of the opinion that there was time enough for such matters. Time, Catherine thought bitterly, was the one thing none of them had been guaranteed. What are Miss Wexford's immediate options? The Duke's voice cut through the heavy silence. She cannot remain indefinitely at this inn. Mr. Graves shifted uncomfortably. I have taken the liberty of writing to Mr. Timothy Fenimore, informing him of his aunt's death and the circumstances surrounding it. However, given the gentleman's known character, I would not advise Miss Wexford to expect any assistance from that quarter. Then what would you advise? Catherine asked, pride warring with desperation in her chest. You might seek a position as a governess or companion, miss. Your education and genteel upbringing would recommend you for such a role. He paused delicately. Though at 27, and without recent references, it may prove challenging. Too old, in other words. Catherine understood perfectly. At 27, she was considered past her prime for marriage and approaching the upper limits of desirability, even as a servant. The truth of her situation settled over her like a shroud. I see. Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Graves. After the solicitor departed, Catherine stood at the window, staring out at Thornbury's modest main street without truly seeing it. Behind her, she heard the Duke dismiss Lucy with a quiet word, then his footsteps approaching. Miss Wexford, I would speak with you plainly, if I may. Your Grace has been nothing but plain since we met. I hardly expect you to change now. The words came out more sharply than Catherine intended, exhaustion and fear making her tongue incautious. If the Duke took offence, he did not show it. Instead, he moved to stand beside her at the window, his hands clasped behind his back, in a posture that suggested military training. Your situation is precarious, he stated matter-of-factly. Without funds or family support, you face considerable difficulties. Yes, I am well aware of my precarious situation, Your Grace. Catherine closed her eyes briefly. Forgive me. That was ungracious. You have shown me nothing but kindness, and I repay you with rudeness. You repay me with honesty, which I value far more than empty courtesy. He turned to look at her directly. Tell me about your family, Miss Wexford. Surely there is someone who might offer assistance. The question opened a door Catherine had kept firmly closed for years. She found herself speaking before she could reconsider the wisdom of such confession. My father was Viscount Wexford. He died 3 years ago, leaving behind debts that consumed what little remained of our estate. He had invested heavily in what proved to be fraudulent ventures, convinced they would restore our fortunes. Her voice grew distant with memory. Instead, they destroyed us. My mother, my younger sister Margaret, and I were left with nothing. Yet your sister married well, I understand. It was not quite a question. Yes. Margaret caught the eye of Mr. Richard Sutton during her first season. He is a wealthy merchant, respectable, if not titled. They wed within 6 months of my father's death. Catherine's hands twisted together. My mother chose to live with them. It was the practical choice, given Mr. Sutton's generous nature and spacious home. And you were not invited to join them? The gentleness in his voice nearly undid her. Catherine swallowed hard against the tightness in her throat. I was invited, Your Grace. But the invitation came with certain conditions. I was to serve as unpaid companion to my mother, to help with Margaret's children when they came, to make myself useful without being too visible. I was to understand that I was there on sufferance, a charity case, who should be grateful for scraps from their table. So you chose Lady Margot instead. Lady Margot was my father's aunt. She offered me a position as her companion with a small salary and genuine affection. It seemed preferable to living as a ghost in my sister's household. Catherine turned from the window, meeting the Duke's blue eyes directly. But now I begin to wonder if I made a terrible mistake. Perhaps I should have swallowed my pride 4 years ago. 4 years ago. The Duke's expression sharpened with interest. I had a private humiliation to recover from as well. The words came before Catherine could stop them. Years of silence breaking like a dam. I was briefly engaged to a gentleman, Mr. Edmund Hartley. He was the second son of an earl, not wealthy, but respectable. We had an understanding, or so I believed. Then he met Margaret. Understanding dawned in the Duke's eyes. He broke your engagement for your sister. He did. Though the family blamed me, of course. I was not charming enough, not pretty enough, not vivacious enough to hold a gentleman's interest. Margaret was all those things I was not. They married 6 months later. Catherine heard the bitterness in her own voice and hated it. So you see, Your Grace, I am quite accustomed to being the less desirable option. Then your family are fools. The Duke spoke with such quiet conviction that Catherine felt heat rising to her cheeks. From what I have observed, Miss Wexford, you possess considerable strength of character, intelligence, and dignity. These qualities hold far more value than superficial charm. Before Catherine could respond to this unexpected praise, Lucy burst into the parlour, her eyes wide with excitement. Your Grace, Miss Catherine, there are men outside who wish to speak with you about the bridge. The Duke's expression hardened immediately. Show them in. 3 men entered the modest parlour. The first was portly and red-faced, wearing the ill-fitting coat of a minor official who had recently acquired both position and self-importance. The second was tall and thin, with the nervous demeanour of someone who knew himself to be in the wrong. The third appeared to be a local farmer, his weathered face creased with concern. Your Grace, the portly man began, bowing with exaggerated deference. I am Mr. Blackwood, the local magistrate. This is Mr. Wells, the surveyor responsible for the Severn Bridge. And this is Mr. Cook, whose property borders the river. Gentlemen, the Duke's voice turned winter cold. I trust you have explanations for the criminal negligence that resulted in 3 deaths. Mr. Wells blanched visibly. Your Grace, I assure you I submitted reports on the bridge's condition repeatedly. I warned that the timber was rotting, that repairs were urgently needed. And yet no repairs were made. It was not a question. The funds were not allocated, Mr. Blackwood interjected quickly. These matters take time, Your Grace. Budgets must be approved, priorities established. 3 people died because priorities were not properly established, Mr. Blackwood. Lady Margot Fenimore, a respected member of society. Her coachman, a man with a wife and 3 children. They died because responsible parties failed in their duties. The magistrate's face reddened further. These accusations are most unfair, Your Grace. We cannot be held responsible for every unfortunate accident. This was no accident. The Duke's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet that was somehow more menacing than any shout. This was the inevitable result of systematic negligence. Mr. Cook, you have something to contribute to this discussion. The farmer stepped forward, twisting his cap in his hands. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but I have been complaining about that bridge for 2 years now. My boy nearly died when a wagon went through a weak spot last summer. I was told the matter would be addressed, but nothing ever came of it, because addressing it would require Mr. Blackwood to account for how the bridge maintenance funds have actually been spent. The Duke turned his piercing gaze on the magistrate. Would it not, Mr. Blackwood? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Catherine watched as the magistrate's bluster deflated, his eyes shifting nervously between the Duke and his companions. I am certain there have been some administrative irregularities, Your Grace, but nothing criminal, I assure you. I am not assured, Mr. Blackwood. In fact, I am quite certain that a thorough investigation will reveal exactly how those funds were misappropriated. The Duke moved closer to the magistrate, his superior height and bearing reducing the other man to insignificance. And I will personally ensure that such an investigation takes place. You may depend upon it. After the men departed in various states of distress and defiance, Catherine found herself looking at the Duke with new eyes. This was not merely a wealthy gentleman performing expected acts of charity. This was a man who wielded his power deliberately and effectively, who understood that rank carried responsibilities as well as privileges. "You did not have to do that," she said quietly. "The investigation, I mean. Lady Margot is beyond help now, but others are not." The Duke turned to face her, and for the first time she saw genuine emotion in his expression, a flash of something raw and painful. "I learned long ago, Miss Wexford, that power unused in service of justice is power wasted. If I can prevent another family from losing someone they love to such negligence, then I will do so. You speak as though you have experience with such loss." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "My elder brother died in a hunting accident 7 years ago. A reckless wager, an imprudent jump, a neck broken in an instant. I was there. I tried to dissuade him from the attempt, but he would not listen. He never did." The Duke's voice grew distant. "I inherited a title I never wanted because my brother believed himself invincible. I am sorry." Catherine spoke the inadequate words softly. "The guilt of surviving those we love is a heavy burden." "Yes." He looked at her with sudden understanding, as though truly seeing her for the first time. "You understand that, I think. My father's death was not sudden, but it was no less my failure to prevent." Catherine heard herself confessing things she had never spoken aloud. "I saw the investments were suspect. I tried to warn him, but he dismissed my concerns. He said I had no head for business, that I should concern myself with needlework and leave finance to men. Within a year, we were ruined, and within 2, he was dead from the shame of it." They stood together in shared silence, two people bound by the particular loneliness of powerless witnessing, of watching those they cared for hurtle toward destruction and being unable to stop it. "Your Grace," Catherine said finally, "you mentioned that I must make decisions about my future. I wonder if I might impose upon your generosity for a few more days while I consider my options. You may stay as long as necessary." His expression softened fractionally. "And, Miss Wexford, when you are ready to travel, I would be honoured to escort you to London. I am returning there myself within the week." "That is very kind, but surely such an arrangement would be highly improper. A young woman travelling alone with a gentleman, even one of your rank. Lucy would accompany you as chaperone, as would my valet and coachman. The proprieties would be observed." He paused, then added with unexpected gentleness, "You should not have to make this journey alone, Miss Wexford. You have endured enough." Catherine felt treacherous tears pricking at her eyes. She blinked them back firmly, maintaining the composure that had become her armour over years of disappointment and loss. "Then I accept, Your Grace." "With gratitude." As the Duke took his leave, Catherine moved to the window once more, watching his tall figure stride down the street with that characteristic air of command. Lucy appeared at her elbow, having clearly been listening from the hallway. "He is a good man, miss," the girl said softly. "Not many of his rank would trouble themselves so over people like us." "No," Catherine agreed, her gaze following the Duke until he disappeared around a corner. "Not many would." But even as she acknowledged his goodness, Catherine felt the familiar weight of reality settling over her shoulders. A Duke, no matter how kind, no matter how concerned, remained impossibly far above her in station. Whatever his reasons for helping her, they were born of duty and honour, not any personal regard. And yet, when he had looked at her just now, when he had shared the story of his brother's death, she had seen something in his eyes that spoke of connection rather than mere obligation. Or perhaps that was simply wishful thinking from a woman whose life had taught her to expect nothing and hope for less. The afternoon sun broke through the clouds outside, casting long shadows across Thornbury Street. Somewhere in that light, Catherine thought, lay a path forward. She simply had to find the courage to walk it, even if she walked alone. The carriage departed Thornbury 3 days after the accident, when Dr. Harlow finally deemed Catherine fit enough to travel. The journey to London would take 3 days under ideal conditions, longer if weather or road conditions proved unfavourable. Catherine settled into the well-appointed interior of the Duke's travelling carriage with a mixture of gratitude and unease, acutely aware that accepting such assistance placed her deeper in his debt with each passing mile. Lucy sat across from her, wide-eyed at the luxury of the conveyance. The seats were upholstered in rich burgundy leather, far superior to the modest conveyance Lady Margot had employed. The Duke's crest was emblazoned discreetly on the door panel, a reminder of the vast gulf in station between Catherine and her benefactor. The Duke himself sat beside the window, his long legs stretched out as much as the confined space allowed. His valet, a dignified man of middle years named Peters, occupied the seat beside Lucy, maintaining the pretense of propriety that allowed this journey to occur at all. The arrangement was hardly conventional, but it was at least defensible should questions arise. "We will stop at the Rose and Crown in Gloucester for the night," the Duke informed them as the carriage rolled through the countryside. "It is a respectable establishment. I have sent word ahead to secure appropriate accommodations." "You are very thorough, Your Grace," Catherine observed, watching the fields pass by her window. Spring was advancing across England, the hedgerows beginning to show touches of green despite the recent storms. "Preparation prevents difficulty." His tone was matter-of-fact. "I learned that lesson early. In the military, Your Grace," Catherine ventured, noting again that military bearing in his posture. "No, though my father wished me to purchase a commission. I learned it from managing estates that my brother neglected." A shadow passed across his face. Charles was brilliant and charming, but he had no patience for the practical matters of running a duchy. That responsibility fell to me even before his death. It was the first time he had mentioned his brother by name. Catherine sensed an opening, a willingness to speak of things usually kept private. The rhythm of the carriage seemed to encourage confidence, creating a space apart from normal social constraints. "You must have been very young when you took on such responsibilities." "I was 24 when my father died, leaving Charles as Duke and me as his heir. Charles was 26, convinced he would live forever, and therefore saw no need to concern himself with tiresome details like tenant welfare or crop rotation." The Duke's voice held no bitterness, only a kind of weary acceptance. "He preferred hunting, gaming, and society. I managed everything else. That must have been a heavy burden for one so young," Catherine said softly. "It was necessary." He turned from the window to look at her directly. Someone had to ensure the tenants were cared for, that the estates remained productive. Charles would have run through the entire fortune within a decade if left to his own devices. Lucy shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly uncertain whether she should be hearing such personal revelations. Peters, the valet, maintained an expression of studied neutrality, as though he heard nothing at all. "And then he died," Catherine prompted gently, sensing there was more to the story. "And then he died." The Duke's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "During a hunt at Ashbourne, our principal seat. The gentleman present that day had been drinking since morning, making increasingly reckless wagers. Charles bet Lord Pemberton £50 that he could clear a fence that had caused 2 falls already that season. Catherine waited, allowing him to tell the story at his own pace. "I was there. I saw him line up for the jump and I knew he would not make it. The fence was too high, the approach too steep, and he had been drinking." The Duke's voice grew quiet, with old pain. "I called out to him to stop, but he only laughed and spurred his horse forward. The animal balked at the last moment. Charles went over its head and landed badly. His neck broke instantly." "Dear God," Catherine whispered. "I am so sorry, Your Grace. I blamed myself for months afterward." "If I had been more forceful in my objection, if I had physically prevented him from making the attempt," he shook his head slowly. "But Charles never listened to caution, not from me or anyone else. He believed the rules that governed ordinary men did not apply to him. You could not have saved him from himself," Catherine said with conviction born of her own experience. "Some people are determined to rush toward their own destruction regardless of who tries to stop them." The Duke's blue eyes sharpened with interest. You speak from experience. Catherine hesitated, then decided that if he had shared his painful history, she owed him the courtesy of reciprocating. My father was similar in some ways. Not reckless in the physical sense, but convinced of his own infallibility in business matters. He invested heavily in ventures that anyone with sense could see were fraudulent. When I tried to express concerns, he dismissed me as a foolish woman who could not understand the complexities of finance. But you were correct. I was correct. Within a year, we had lost everything. The estate, the fortune my grandfather had spent a lifetime building, all of it gone. Catherine's hands twisted in her lap. My father could not bear the shame. He took to his bed and simply faded away, as though willing himself to die rather than face what he had done. How old were you when this happened? 24. The same age you were when your father died. Catherine managed a small, bitter smile. It seems we have that in common, Your Grace. We both watched people we loved destroy themselves while we stood by, helpless to prevent it. Lucy made a small sound of distress, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Catherine reached across to pat the girl's hand reassuringly. Forgive me, Lucy. These are not cheerful topics for a journey. Oh no, miss, Lucy said quickly. I mean, it is very sad, but it helps to understand. You have been through so much, both of you. The simple compassion in the maid's voice seemed to break some of the tension in the carriage. The Duke's expression softened fractionally as he regarded the young woman. You are loyal to your mistress, Lucy. That is a valuable quality. Miss Catherine has been nothing but kind to me, Your Grace, Lucy replied with unexpected firmness. When Lady Margot hired me 2 years ago, I was just a girl from the country with no training at all. Miss Catherine taught me everything I needed to know, patient as could be, never once making me feel stupid for my mistakes. Catherine felt her cheeks warming. Lucy, please. It is true, miss. You are the kindest lady I have ever served, and I will not hear anyone say different. Nor should you. The Duke's voice carried approval. Loyalty such as yours is rare and should be valued. They stopped for the night at Gloucester as planned, the Rose and Crown proving to be exactly as respectable as the Duke had promised. Catherine and Lucy were given a comfortable room on the 2nd floor, while the Duke and his valet took accommodations on the 3rd. Dinner was served in a private parlour, allowing them to avoid the common room and the curious stares their unusual party would surely attract. Over roasted chicken and vegetables, the conversation turned to lighter topics. The Duke proved surprisingly knowledgeable about literature, discussing the latest novels with an enthusiasm that transformed his usually austere features. Catherine found herself debating the merits of various authors, their exchange growing animated as they discovered shared opinions on some works and delightful disagreements on others. You cannot seriously believe that Richardson is superior to Fielding, Catherine argued, a smile tugging at her lips despite the seriousness of her tone. Fielding has wit and observation that Richardson entirely lacks. Richardson has depth of feeling, the Duke countered. His characters experience genuine emotional complexity. His characters are tedious moral exemplars with no resemblance to actual human beings, Catherine retorted. Give me Tom Jones over Pamela any day. Lucy watched this exchange with barely concealed delight, her gaze moving between them like a spectator at a tennis match. Even Peters allowed himself a small smile at his employer's obvious enjoyment of the debate. The 2nd day of travel brought clearer skies and better roads. As the miles passed, Catherine found herself sharing more of her history with the Duke, details she had never intended to reveal to anyone, let alone a man she had known less than a week. She told him about her sister Margaret, how they had been close as children, but had grown apart after their father's ruin. Margaret adapted to our changed circumstances by becoming even more determined to secure a wealthy husband. She succeeded admirably. Mr. Richard Sutton is a very successful merchant with interests in shipping and textiles. He comes from common stock originally, but his fortune more than compensates for his lack of breeding in society's eyes. And your mother chose to live with them rather than you and Lady Margot, the Duke observed. My mother made the practical choice, Catherine said, though the words still carried an edge of pain, even after 3 years. Margaret's home is grand and comfortable. Lady Margot's was modest and increasingly economical as her funds dwindled. I do not blame my mother for choosing comfort over sentiment. Do you not? The Duke's gaze was penetrating. I think you do, though you are too generous to admit it. Catherine looked away, discomfited by his perception. What purpose would blame serve? My mother did what she thought best for herself. She wrote occasionally, asking after my health and Lady Margot's, but she made it clear that I should not expect any material assistance from her or from Margaret. They had their own lives to consider. They abandoned you, the Duke said bluntly. Let us call it what it was. The truth of his words struck Catherine with unexpected force. She had spent 3 years telling herself that her mother's choice was reasonable, that Margaret's indifference was understandable. But hearing the Duke name it for what it truly was, abandonment, cracked something inside her carefully maintained composure. Yes, she admitted quietly. They did. Lucy reached across to squeeze Catherine's hand, her young face fierce with loyalty. They were fools, miss. Absolute fools. Despite the pain of the admission, Catherine found herself smiling at Lucy's vehemence. Thank you, Lucy. As they continued toward London, the Duke shared more of his own history. He spoke of the weight of inheriting a title he had never sought, of learning to navigate the treacherous waters of politics and society while grieving his brother's death. He mentioned, almost as an aside, an engagement that had ended badly 5 years prior. Miss Lydia Fairchild, he said, his voice carefully neutral. We were betrothed for 6 months. She ended it when she met the Earl of Thornton, a man 20 years her senior, but possessed of a fortune even greater than mine. She left you for a larger fortune. Catherine could not keep the shock from her voice. She was very apologetic about it. A hint of bitterness crept into his tone. She explained that while she held me in high regard, practical considerations must take precedence over affection. Love, she informed me, does not pay for gowns or jewels, or the lifestyle she envisioned for herself. That is despicable, Catherine said hotly. To treat matters of the heart as mere financial transactions. Is it so different from what your sister did? The Duke challenged gently. Or what countless young ladies do each season, angling for the wealthiest title they can secure? Catherine considered this uncomfortable truth. I suppose it is not, but that does not make it less mercenary or less hurtful to those who believed they were valued for more than their bank accounts. No, he agreed quietly. It does not. The conversation left Catherine with a new understanding of the Duke's reserved demeanour. He had learned, as she had, that trust was a dangerous commodity, easily betrayed by those who should hold it most sacred. On the 3rd day, as the outskirts of London came into view, the Duke addressed practical matters. My sister, Lady Victoria Hartfield, maintains a home in Mayfair with her husband, Lord Hartfield. I have written to her, explaining your circumstances. She has agreed to receive you as a guest until you determine your next steps. Your Grace, I cannot possibly impose on your family in such a manner, Catherine protested. Surely there must be some respectable lodging house where Lucy and I might stay temporarily. Respectable lodging houses require funds you do not possess, the Duke replied with characteristic bluntness. And they ask questions about unaccompanied young women that would prove difficult to answer satisfactorily. Victoria's home offers both shelter and social protection. But what will people say? A young woman of no fortune staying with the Duke of Ashbourne's sister will invite speculation. People will say many things regardless of what we do, Miss Wexford. At least this way you will have a roof over your head while they say them. Catherine recognised the wisdom in his words, however uncomfortable they made her. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. They arrived at Lady Victoria Hartfield's elegant townhouse in late afternoon, the fashionable square quiet in the spring sunshine. A butler of impressive dignity admitted them, his expression revealing nothing of what he thought about this unusual party. Lady Victoria herself appeared within moments, sweeping into the entrance hall with an air of bustling efficiency. She was perhaps 30, handsome rather than beautiful, with the same commanding presence as her brother, though softened by feminine warmth. Alexander, she greeted the Duke, kissing his cheek. You sent such an alarming letter. I have been imagining all manner of catastrophes. Her sharp grey eyes, so similar to her brother's, moved to Catherine. "And you must be Miss Wexford. My dear girl, what an ordeal you have endured." "Lady Victoria, I am deeply grateful for your hospitality," Catherine began, but the other woman waved away her thanks. "Nonsense. Any friend of Alexander's is welcome here, and any young woman who has survived what you have deserves a safe haven." Victoria's gaze moved to Lucy, hovering uncertainly behind Catherine. "This is your maid. Come along then, both of you. Mrs. Morris will show you to your rooms. I have put you in the blue chamber, Miss Wexford. I trust you will find it comfortable." As servants hurried to carry in Catherine's meagre belongings, Victoria drew her brother aside. Catherine could not hear their whispered conversation, but she saw Victoria's expression shift from concern to something more assessing as she glanced between the Duke and Catherine. Later, after Catherine and Lucy had been installed in a beautiful room decorated in shades of blue and cream, Victoria came to call on them. Lucy was sent to arrange Catherine's few possessions, leaving the two women alone. "Miss Wexford, I hope you will forgive my brother's somewhat high-handed methods," Victoria began, settling into a chair near the window. "He has a habit of managing situations without consulting the people most affected by his decisions. He has been nothing but kind, Lady Victoria. I owe him my life." "Yes, so I understand." Victoria's expression grew more serious. "But I must speak plainly with you, my dear. The circumstances of your arrival in London, travelling with my brother, staying in his sister's home, these things will be noticed and discussed. The Ton has little else to occupy its collective mind, and speculation about the Duke of Ashbourne's activities is always popular sport." Catherine felt her stomach tighten with apprehension. "I had not considered the impropriety from his perspective. I was only thinking of my own desperate situation." "Of course you were, and no one could blame you for that." Victoria leaned forward, her voice gentler. "But you must understand that society will not be so generous in its interpretation. There will be whispers, assumptions about the nature of your relationship with Alexander. Some will paint you as a fortune hunter, others as something far worse. I assure you, Lady Victoria, there is no relationship beyond the Duke's charitable impulse to assist someone in dire circumstances." "I believe you." Victoria studied her thoughtfully. "But that will not stop the gossips. My advice to you, Miss Wexford, is to comport yourself with absolute propriety while under my roof. Give them no ammunition for their speculation. I understand completely, and I will seek a position as quickly as possible to remove myself from this situation." Victoria nodded approvingly. "That is sensible. In the meantime, you are my guest, and will be treated as such. Now, tell me about yourself, Miss Wexford. I wish to know more about the woman who has captured my brother's attention so thoroughly." "I have not captured anyone's attention, Lady Victoria," Catherine protested. "He simply happened to be present when the bridge collapsed." "Perhaps." Victoria's expression suggested she remained unconvinced. "But Alexander has never before gone to such lengths for a stranger. He is generous with his tenants and those he considers his responsibility, but this goes beyond his usual charity." Catherine had no answer for that, and she found herself thinking about it long after Victoria had departed. What did motivate the Duke's continued concern? Was it simply the natural aftermath of having saved her life, or was there something more? That evening, she stood at the window of her borrowed chamber, looking out at the lamplit street below. Lucy was already asleep in the small adjoining room, exhausted from the journey. Catherine should have been equally tired, but sleep eluded her. In the space of a week, her entire world had been overturned. Lady Margot was dead. Her security was gone. She was living on the charity of strangers, dependent on the goodwill of a duke who owed her nothing beyond the common humanity any person might show another. And yet, when she thought of Alexander Greymore, she felt something beyond simple gratitude, something that frightened her with its intensity and its impossibility. A man like the Duke of Ashbourne did not form attachments to impoverished gentlewomen with no fortune and no prospects. Whatever kindness he showed her now would fade once he returned to his normal life, surrounded by ladies of rank and beauty who could offer him what Catherine never could. Tomorrow, she would begin searching for a position. She would impose on Lady Victoria's hospitality as briefly as possible. She would be sensible and practical and grateful for what assistance she had received. But tonight, alone in the darkness, Catherine allowed herself a moment of foolish wishing. A moment of imagining what it might be like if circumstances were different, if she were someone other than who she was. If the Duke's attention meant something beyond duty, then she turned from the window, climbed into the comfortable bed, and firmly reminded herself that fairy tales did not come true for women like her. The following weeks settled into a pattern that was both comfortable and increasingly complicated. Catherine spent her mornings reviewing advertisements in the Times for positions as governess or companion, composing careful letters of inquiry to the few prospects that seemed suitable. Lucy accompanied her to the handful of interviews that resulted, the young maid's presence lending what small measure of respectability it could to a woman seeking employment. The first interview was with a Mrs. Pemberton, a wealthy merchant's wife, whose 3 daughters required a governess capable of teaching French and deportment. Catherine presented herself at the appointed hour, her best dress freshly pressed, her references from Lady Margot carefully copied in her own hand since the originals had been lost to the Seven. Mrs. Pemberton received her in a drawing room that spoke of new money attempting to imitate old. Everything was expensive but slightly wrong, the proportions of the furniture not quite suited to the space, the artwork chosen for its gilt frames rather than its artistic merit. Miss Wexford, Mrs. Pemberton began without preamble, her sharp eyes assessing Catherine from head to toe. You claim to have been companion to Lady Margot Fenimore. How did she die? In a carriage accident, madam. The bridge over the Severn collapsed during a storm. How tragic. And you survived, I understand. Thanks to the intervention of a certain duke. Mrs. Pemberton's tone suggested this was not a point in Catherine's favour. The circumstance has been much discussed in certain circles. Catherine felt her spine stiffen. I was fortunate that the Duke of Ashbourne was passing at that moment, yes. Fortunate indeed. The woman's smile did not reach her eyes. Tell me, Miss Wexford, are you currently residing with Lady Victoria Hartfield, the Duke's sister? I am temporarily her guest, yes, until I secure a position. I see. Mrs. Pemberton set down her teacup with a decisive click. I am afraid, Miss Wexford, that your situation makes you unsuitable for my household. I require a governess whose reputation is absolutely above reproach. The association with the Duke of Ashbourne, however it came about, has created speculation that I cannot have attached to my daughter's education. Good day. Catherine and Lucy were shown out before Catherine could formulate a response. On the street, Lucy's face was flushed with indignation. The nerve of that woman, miss! As if you had done anything wrong by being rescued from drowning. She is protecting her daughter's reputations, Catherine said wearily. I cannot fault her for that, even if her conclusions about my character are entirely unjust. The second and third interviews proceeded similarly. Each prospective employer received her with initial interest that cooled rapidly upon learning of her connection to the Duke. By the fourth rejection, Catherine began to understand the precariousness of her position. The very act that had saved her life had simultaneously made her unsuitable for respectable employment. The Duke, unaware of these difficulties, continued to call at his sister's home several times each week. Victoria received him with knowing looks and poorly concealed amusement, clearly seeing something in her brother's behaviour that Catherine herself tried not to examine too closely. You are quite attentive to our guest's welfare, Victoria observed one afternoon, after the Duke had spent nearly an hour discussing current political matters with Catherine in the drawing room. One might almost think you had a particular interest in Miss Wexford's situation. One would be correct, the Duke replied with his characteristic directness. I am interested in ensuring that a woman who suffered through no fault of her own is not left without recourse. How noble. Victoria's tone was dry. And it has nothing to do with the fact that Miss Wexford is intelligent, well-read, and possesses a dignity that most ladies of higher rank cannot match. The Duke's expression remained impassive, but Catherine noticed a slight tightening around his eyes. Miss Wexford's personal qualities are irrelevant to my sense of obligation toward her welfare. If you say so, brother dear. Catherine, who had overheard this exchange from the hallway where she had been returning a book to the library, felt her cheeks burning. She retreated quickly to her chamber, where Lucy found her sitting at the window, staring unseeing at the street below. Are you unwell, miss? Lucy asked with concern. I am perfectly well. Simply thinking. About His Grace? The maid's tone was gently teasing. Lucy, please do not indulge in foolish speculation. Is it foolish, miss? He comes here 3 or 4 times a week, always asking after you, always finding reasons to speak with you. And the way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching. Lucy sat down on the edge of the bed. I have eyes, miss. So does everyone else. Which is precisely the problem, Catherine admitted. His attention, however well meant, is making it impossible for me to secure a position. Every potential employer hears of my connection to him and immediately assumes the worst. Then perhaps you should not be seeking such a position. What else am I to do? I cannot live on your sister's charity indefinitely. I must establish myself somehow. Before Lucy could respond, a knock at the door announced Victoria's arrival. The older woman entered with a purposeful expression that suggested she had come with a specific agenda. Miss Wexford, I have received an invitation to Lady Crawford's ball tomorrow evening. It is one of the more important events of the season, and I believe you should attend. Catherine felt alarm rising in her chest. Lady Victoria, I appreciate the thought, but I am hardly in a position to attend society events. I have neither the wardrobe nor the standing. You have both as my guest. I have taken the liberty of having my dressmaker send several suitable gowns for your consideration. They should arrive within the hour. Victoria raised a hand to forestall Catherine's protests. Before you object, let me explain my reasoning. You are seeking employment, yes? But you are going about it in entirely the wrong way. Responding to advertisements puts you at the mercy of women like Mrs. Pemberton, who will judge you based on gossip rather than character. Then what do you suggest? I suggest you allow society to see you as you are, poised, educated, entirely proper. Let them observe that the Duke's interest in you, whatever its nature, is not the sordid affair the gossips imagine. Once you are established as a respectable young woman of good family fallen on difficult times, opportunities will present themselves more naturally. Or, Catherine said slowly, society will see me as a fortune hunter attempting to trap a duke. Some will see that regardless of what you do. Victoria's expression was sympathetic but firm. But others will see the truth. And those are the people whose opinions matter. The gowns arrived as promised, each more beautiful than the last. Catherine selected a pale green silk that brought out the colour of her eyes, its modest neckline and elegant lines striking the perfect balance between fashionable and respectable. Lucy helped her dress the following evening, arranging her chestnut hair in a style that was both becoming and appropriate for a woman of her circumstances. When Catherine descended to the drawing room where Victoria waited, the older woman nodded with satisfaction. Perfect. You look exactly as you should, a gentlewoman of quality. Now, Alexander will be escorting us this evening. The Duke is attending? Catherine's pulse quickened despite her best efforts at composure. He is. I specifically requested his presence. Victoria's smile was knowing. A woman attending her first major society event in London requires proper protection. My brother's presence will ensure that no one dares treat you with anything less than courtesy. The ballroom at Crawford House blazed with candlelight, the chandeliers casting golden illumination over what seemed like hundreds of elegantly dressed guests. Catherine felt her courage wavering as she stood at the entrance with Victoria and the Duke, acutely conscious of the curious stares directed their way. Steady, the Duke murmured beside her, his hand settling briefly at the small of her back in a gesture both reassuring and entirely improper. You belong here as much as anyone else in this room. I am the impoverished daughter of a disgraced Viscount, Your Grace. I think we both know that is not true. You are the daughter of a Viscount, period. The rest is irrelevant. His voice carried absolute conviction. Now, shall we proceed, or would you prefer to turn and flee? Despite her anxiety, Catherine felt a smile tugging at her lips. I am many things, Your Grace, but I am not a coward. I know. His blue eyes met hers with unexpected warmth. I have known that since I pulled you from the Severn. As they moved into the ballroom, Catherine became aware of the whispers following in their wake. She caught fragments of conversation, her name paired with the Duke's, speculation about their relationship, questions about her sudden appearance in society. Ignore them, Victoria advised quietly. They will gossip regardless of what you do. At least this way you control the narrative by your behaviour. Lady Crawford, their hostess, received them with careful courtesy that suggested Victoria had prepared the ground in advance. Miss Wexford, how delightful to make your acquaintance. Lady Victoria has told me of your recent ordeal. How dreadful for you. You are very kind, Lady Crawford. Not at all. We must all support one another in times of difficulty. The older woman's shrewd gaze moved between Catherine and the Duke. I understand you owe your life to His Grace's intervention. I do indeed. The Duke showed great courage in risking his own safety to pull me from the river. How fortunate he was passing at that moment. Lady Crawford's tone suggested layers of meaning beneath the simple words. Now, you must circulate, my dear. There are several ladies present whom you should meet. As Lady Crawford moved away to greet other guests, Catherine found herself surrounded by curious onlookers. Some were openly friendly, others reserved judgment, and a few were clearly hostile. She fielded questions about the accident with as much grace as she could muster, conscious of the Duke standing nearby, his presence a silent shield against the worst of the speculation. Then a new voice cut through the polite murmur of conversation, sharp and carrying more authority than its owner's years might suggest. Your Grace, what a pleasure to see you this evening. I had begun to think you were avoiding society entirely. Catherine turned to see a striking woman approaching, perhaps 30 years of age, with dark hair and features that would have been beautiful were they not arranged in an expression of calculated displeasure. She wore a gown of deep crimson that pushed the boundaries of propriety with its daring neckline, and diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists. Lady Henrietta, the Duke's voice cooled perceptibly. I have been occupied with estate matters. Estate matters. But Lady Henrietta's dark eyes moved to Catherine with undisguised assessment. Or perhaps matters of a more personal nature. You have not introduced me to your companion, Your Grace, Lady Henrietta Blackwell. May I present Miss Catherine Wexford? Miss Wexford, Lady Henrietta is the widow of the late Lord Blackwell. A pleasure, Miss Wexford. Lady Henrietta's smile did not reach her eyes. I have heard so much about you. The circumstances of your arrival in London have been much discussed. I imagine they have, Catherine replied evenly, refusing to be cowed by the other woman's obvious hostility. Accidents tend to be of interest to those with idle time for speculation. A flicker of surprise crossed Lady Henrietta's face, as though she had not expected Catherine to respond with such directness. Indeed. Though some might say the accident has proven remarkably fortunate for you, Miss Wexford. To find yourself rescued by a duke, installed in his sister's home, escorted by him to society events. One might almost suspect the entire affair was arranged. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Catherine felt rage building in her chest, not for herself but for Lady Margot, for the coachman who had died leaving behind a widow and children, for the terror of being trapped beneath icy water as her life drained away. One might suspect that, Catherine said quietly, her voice carrying despite its softness, if one were the sort of person whose mind naturally turned to deception and manipulation. As I am not such a person, it did not occur to me that others might be. Catherine. The Duke's use of her given name drew startled glances from those nearby. His hand moved to her elbow, his touch gentle, but his expression dangerous, as he turned to face Lady Henrietta. I believe Miss Wexford has shown remarkable restraint in not calling you out for that vile insinuation. I am not similarly constrained. You will apologize, Henrietta. Now. Lady Henrietta's face flushed with anger and embarrassment at being publicly rebuked. I meant no offence, Your Grace. I was merely repeating what others have said. Then those others are fools, and you are a fool for repeating their poison. The Duke's voice turned winter cold. Miss Wexford nearly died through no fault of her own. She watched her aunt drown. She has conducted herself with dignity and courage throughout an ordeal that would have destroyed lesser women. Anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me. The surrounding guests had fallen silent, watching this drama unfold with fascination. Lady Henrietta, realizing she had badly miscalculated, attempted to retreat gracefully. Of course, Your Grace. I apologize if my words gave offence. She turned to Catherine with barely concealed fury. "Please forgive me, Miss Wexford. I spoke thoughtlessly." "Apology accepted, Lady Henrietta." Catherine kept her voice cool and composed, though her heart was racing. After Lady Henrietta departed in a rustle of crimson silk, Victoria appeared at Catherine's side. "Well handled, my dear. You made an enemy tonight, but you also impressed everyone watching. That takes steel." "I should not have spoken so sharply," Catherine said, her hands trembling slightly now that the confrontation had passed. "I let my temper get the better of me." "Your temper was entirely justified." The Duke's expression remained grim. "Henrietta has been spreading such rumours for weeks, I suspect. It is time someone called her to account." "She was courting you, was she not?" Catherine heard herself ask, before she could reconsider the wisdom of such a question. "She has been attempting to secure my interest for 2 years, the Duke replied with distaste. "I have given her no encouragement whatsoever, but she persists in believing that her rank and fortune entitle her to my attention." Before Catherine could respond, the orchestra struck up a waltz. The Duke turned to her, offering his hand with unexpected formality. "Miss Wexford, would you honour me with this dance?" Catherine stared at his outstretched hand, conscious of every eye in the ballroom upon them. To dance with the Duke once might be explained as courtesy. To dance with him after he had just publicly defended her honour would be interpreted as something far more significant. "Your Grace, I am not certain that would be wise." "I am not asking you to be wise, Miss Wexford. I am asking you to dance." "Hi." There was something in his eyes, some intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. Catherine placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her onto the floor. The moment his hand settled at her waist, the moment they began to move together with the music, Catherine felt the rest of the ballroom fade away. He led with confident precision, his steps perfectly matched to hers, as though they had danced together countless times before. "You dance beautifully," he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "As do you, Your Grace. I suspect you have had considerable practice." "Some, though I cannot recall enjoying it as much as I am enjoying this moment." Catherine's pulse quickened at his words. "Your Grace, you should not say such things." "Why not, if they are true?" "Because people will misunderstand. They will think there is something between us beyond your charitable concern for my welfare." "Perhaps I wish them to think precisely that." His blue eyes searched her face. "Would that be so terrible?" Catherine's heart seemed to stop entirely. "You cannot mean that. You are a duke. I am a penniless nobody with a tarnished reputation. The very thought is impossible." "Is it?" His hand tightened fractionally at her waist. "You have been in my thoughts constantly since that day at the river, Catherine. I find myself seeking excuses to call on my sister, hoping to see you. I lie awake at night wondering if you are comfortable, if you are safe, if you are thinking of me even a fraction as much as I think of you." "Please," Catherine whispered, her throat tight with emotion. "Do not say such things. You are confused, feeling responsible for me because you saved my life. That is all this is." "That is not all this is, and you know it." His voice held quiet certainty. "But I will not press you. Not here. Not now. I simply wanted you to know the truth of my feelings." The waltz ended too soon and too late, leaving Catherine shaken and confused. Victoria appeared immediately, tactfully suggesting they take refreshment, guiding Catherine away from the dance floor and the curious stares that followed. "He danced with you twice," Victoria murmured, as they moved toward the refreshment room. "That is significant, Catherine. Very significant." "It is impossible," Catherine replied, her voice hollow. "You must see that it is impossible." Before Victoria could respond, Lucy appeared at Catherine's side, her face flushed with excitement. "Miss Catherine, a gentleman just approached me with a message for you. A Mr. Aldrich, steward to the Marquis of Denbury. He wishes to speak with you about a position as governess to the Marquis's children in Northumberland." Catherine felt the world tilting beneath her feet. A position, a real position, far from London and the impossible situation she found herself in, far from the Duke and the feelings he stirred in her that could lead nowhere but heartbreak. "Tell him I will speak with him immediately," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Lucy hesitated. Miss, are you certain? Tonight? Of all nights? Especially tonight. Catherine straightened her shoulders. Please convey my willingness to meet with him now, if he is amenable. The interview with Mr. Aldrich was brief and businesslike. The Marquess required a governess capable of teaching 3 daughters, aged 8, 10, and 12. The position included room, board, and a modest salary. The family would be in residence at their Northumberland estate for at least 2 years before returning to London. The Marquess values discretion and proper deportment above all else, Mr. Aldrich explained. He would require references, of course. Lady Victoria Hartfield would provide a reference, Catherine said. And the Duke of Ashbourne. Mr. Aldrich's expression shifted slightly at the mention of the Duke's name. I see. Yes, those would be most acceptable. When might you be available to begin? Within a fortnight, if that suits the Marquess. Excellent. I shall relay your acceptance to my employer. You should expect to hear from him within days. When Catherine returned to the ballroom, she found the Duke in conversation with several gentlemen near the windows. His eyes found hers immediately, and something in her expression must have communicated her news. For his entire demeanour changed, hardening into that familiar reserve. Victoria, observing this exchange, sighed quietly. You accepted the position. I did. It is exactly what I have been seeking. Is it? Victoria's gaze was penetrating. Or is it simply an escape? Catherine had no answer for that, and she spent the remainder of the evening avoiding the Duke's attempts to speak with her privately. When the ball finally ended and they returned to Victoria's townhouse, the Duke followed them inside despite the late hour. Miss Wexford, a word, if you please. It was not a request. Victoria tactfully withdrew, leaving Catherine and the Duke alone in the entrance hall. He stood at the base of the stairs, his expression thunderous. You accepted a position in Northumberland. I did. Yes. It is an excellent opportunity. It is a prison sentence. His voice was harsh with anger. Hundreds of miles from London, buried in the countryside with no society, no life beyond caring for other people's children. It is employment, Your Grace. It is independence and dignity. It is what I came to London seeking. It is you running away. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. Running from me, from what is developing between us. There is nothing developing between us. Catherine's voice rose despite her best efforts. You are a duke. I am nobody. Whatever you think you feel is gratitude or responsibility or some misguided sense of obligation. It is not real, and it cannot lead anywhere. You are wrong. His hands gripped her shoulders, not roughly but firmly, forcing her to look at him. What I feel is real, Catherine. More real than anything I have felt in years, and you feel it too. Deny it if you must. But I know the truth. Catherine felt tears burning behind her eyes, threatening to spill over. What you are feeling will pass, Your Grace. When I am gone, when you return to your normal life, you will see that I am right. This is not possible. It cannot be possible. Because you are too proud to accept what I am offering. Because I am too sensible to believe it could ever work. Catherine pulled away from his grip, wrapping her arms around herself protectively. I have been a burden on you and your sister long enough. I will not repay your kindness by allowing you to ruin yourself for my sake. Ruin myself? By caring for you? By thinking you care for me when what you truly feel is responsibility. Catherine forced herself to meet his eyes, to say the words that would end this before it truly began. I accept your friendship with gratitude, Your Grace. But I cannot accept more, nor can I remain here to tempt you into making declarations you will later regret. The position in Northumberland is the right choice for both of us. The Duke stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stepped back, his features settling into that impenetrable mask she had seen the first day at the river. Very well, Miss Wexford. If that is your decision, I will respect it. His voice was cold, distant. I wish you every happiness in your new position. He turned and departed without another word, the door closing behind him with quiet finality. Catherine stood alone in the entrance hall, listening to his carriage pull away into the night, and wondered if she had just made the wisest decision of her life or the greatest mistake. The week following the ball passed in cold silence, The Duke did not call at Victoria's home, did not send messages, gave no sign that Catherine existed at all. Victoria watched this development with poorly concealed frustration, dividing her disapproval equally between her stubborn brother and her equally stubborn guest. Catherine threw herself into preparations for her departure, corresponding with the Marquis of Denbury's household, arranging what few belongings she possessed, and trying not to think about Alexander Greymore or the expression on his face when she had refused what he offered. Lucy, however, had no such compunctions about sharing her opinions. "It is wrong, miss," the young maid declared as she folded Catherine's modest collection of chemises. "His Grace cares for you truly. Anyone with eyes can see it. And you care for him. Why must you run away to Northumberland?" "I am not running away. I am accepting honest employment." "You are running away," Lucy insisted with the boldness their shared ordeal had granted her. "You are afraid, miss. Afraid to believe that a man like the Duke could truly want someone like you." The words struck closer to truth than Catherine cared to admit. "Even if his feelings are genuine now, Lucy, they will not last. When he returns to his normal life, when I am no longer this interesting problem to solve, he will see me for what I am. A woman with nothing to offer him. You underestimate yourself, miss, and you underestimate his Grace." That evening, Victoria requested Catherine's presence in the drawing room after dinner. Catherine found the older woman seated by the fire, a glass of wine in her hand and a determined expression on her face. "Sit down, Catherine. We need to speak plainly." Catherine settled into the chair opposite, bracing herself for whatever lecture was coming. "You are leaving for Northumberland in 5 days," Victoria began without preamble. "Before you go, there are things you need to understand about my brother. Lady Victoria, I do not think this is appropriate. Appropriate or not, you will hear me." Victoria's tone left no room for argument. "Alexander has not called here this week, not because he no longer cares for you, but because he is hurt and angry. He opened himself to you in a way he has not done with anyone since Lydia Fairchild destroyed his ability to trust." The name sent a chill through Catherine. "He mentioned her briefly during our journey to London. She left him for a wealthier man." "She did far worse than that." Victoria leaned forward, her expression grave. "Alexander was 23 when he met Lydia. She was 18, beautiful, accomplished, the daughter of a baron with moderate fortune. They courted for 6 months before he proposed. She accepted immediately, or so it seemed." Catherine listened, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The engagement lasted 4 months. During that time, Alexander was devoted to her completely. He took her opinions seriously, consulted her on estate matters, treated her as an equal partner in all things. He loved her, Catherine, as deeply as a young man of 23 can love. Victoria's voice softened with old pain. Then the Earl of Thornton expressed interest in her. He was 60 years old, a widower with grown children, but his fortune was immense, nearly twice what Alexander would inherit. "Dear God," Catherine whispered. Lydia came to Alexander one afternoon and informed him, quite calmly, that she was breaking their engagement to marry Thornton. When Alexander asked why, when he demanded to know if he had done something wrong, she laughed. Victoria's hands tightened around her wineglass. She told him that love was a pleasant fantasy, but practicality must prevail. She said, and I remember her exact words because Alexander repeated them to me later. She said that love does not pay for silks and jewels, that affection does not maintain a London house and a country estate in the manner she desired. She told him he should not take it personally, that it was simply business. Catherine felt tears burning behind her eyes. How could anyone be so cruel? Lydia Fairchild was not cruel, which made it worse. She was simply honest about viewing marriage as a transaction. She felt no malice toward Alexander, no guilt about breaking his heart. To her, it was a rational choice. Victoria met Catherine's gaze directly. That experience taught my brother that women, particularly women in financial difficulty, cannot be trusted when it comes to matters of the heart and fortune. Understanding crashed over Catherine like a wave. And when I refused his declarations, when I insisted his feelings were merely responsibility, it seemed like Lydia all over again. Me calculating that his interest would not last, rejecting him before he could realize his mistake. Precisely. You wounded him in exactly the same place Lydia did, though your motivations were entirely different. But I was trying to protect him, Catherine protested. I was trying to save him from making a terrible mistake, from tying himself to a woman who would be a burden and an embarrassment. Did it never occur to you, my dear, that Alexander is capable of making his own decisions about what constitutes a burden? Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. You decided, without consulting him, that you knew better than he did what would make him happy. That is precisely what Lydia did, in a sense. She decided his love was not enough without asking him. Catherine rose abruptly, moving to the window to hide the tears now streaming down her face. What would you have me do, Lady Victoria? Accept his proposal, marry him, and watch as society tears him apart for making such a misalliance? Watch as he comes to resent me for limiting his prospects, for embarrassing his family. I would have you trust him. Victoria came to stand beside her. Trust that when Alexander Greymore says he wants something, he has considered all angles and made his choice with full awareness of the consequences. He is the Duke of Ashbourne. Society's opinion has never dictated his actions, and it never will. But it should, Catherine insisted. He has responsibilities, a legacy to maintain. He needs a wife who can support those things, not a penniless nobody who will drag him down. He needs a wife who loves him for who he is, not what he possesses. A wife who challenges his thinking, who shares his values, who makes him laugh and think and feel alive. Victoria gripped Catherine's shoulders, forcing her to turn and meet her eyes. He needs you, Catherine, and unless I am very much mistaken, you need him as well. Before Catherine could respond, Lucy burst into the room, her face flushed with distress. My lady, Miss Catherine, you must come quickly. There are ladies in the entrance hall, and they are saying terrible things about Miss Catherine to the butler. Victoria's expression hardened immediately. Stay here, she commanded Catherine, then swept from the room with Lucy hurrying behind. But Catherine had never been skilled at following orders when her own reputation was at stake. She followed them to the entrance hall, arriving in time to hear Lady Henrietta Blackwell's voice ringing through the elegant space. I am merely warning you, as a friend, Lady Victoria, that you are harbouring a viper in your home. That woman arranged the entire bridge collapse to ensnare the Duke. Why else would she survive while Lady Margot conveniently died? 3 other ladies stood with Henrietta, fashionable women of middle years, whose expressions ranged from uncertain to eagerly malicious. Catherine recognised one as Mrs. Pemberton, the woman who had refused to employ her as governess. That is a vile accusation with not a shred of evidence to support it, Victoria said coldly. You will withdraw it immediately, Henrietta, or I will have you removed from my home. Evidence? Henrietta's laugh was sharp and bitter. The evidence is in her very presence here, in the Duke's unprecedented attention to a woman of no fortune or standing. She has seduced him through manipulation and false helplessness. I did nothing of the sort. Catherine stepped forward into the entrance hall, her voice steady despite the rage coursing through her veins. I nearly drowned Lady Henrietta. I watched my aunt die. I would gladly trade places with Lady Margot if I could. How dare you suggest I arrange such horror for personal gain? Because that is what women like you do, Henrietta spat, her composure cracking to reveal the venom beneath. Women with nothing to offer but a pretty face and a sob story, angling for a title and fortune they have no right to claim. You speak of women like me as though we are a different species, Catherine replied, her voice dropping to dangerous quiet. But I think you and I are not so different, Lady Henrietta. We have both set our sights on the Duke of Ashbourne. The only difference is that I never pursued him, while you have been throwing yourself at him for 2 years with increasing desperation. Henrietta's face flushed scarlet. How dare you speak to me in such a manner? How dare you come into Lady Victoria's home and slander her guest? Catherine moved closer, drawing on every ounce of dignity she possessed. You claim I have no standing, no worth beyond what the Duke's attention might grant me. Perhaps that is true, but at least I have never debased myself by pursuing a man who has shown me nothing but polite indifference. At least I have never resorted to spreading lies and poison, because I cannot accept that I am not wanted. The entrance hall fell silent. the other ladies staring at Catherine with expressions ranging from shock to grudging admiration. Even Victoria looked surprised by Catherine's vehemence. "You will regret those words," Henrietta said, her voice shaking with fury. "I will see to it that every door in London is closed to you. Every door that matters is already closed to me, Lady Henrietta. Your threats hold no power over someone who has nothing left to lose." Henrietta turned on her heel and swept from the house, her companions scurrying after her. Victoria closed the door behind them with deliberate calm, then turned to Catherine with an expression that mingled approval and concern. "That was magnificently done, my dear. Also spectacularly unwise. Henrietta will make good on her threat to damage you further." "Let her." Catherine felt strangely liberated, as though confronting Henrietta had burned away some essential fear. "I leave for Northumberland in 5 days. Whatever poison she spreads in London will not follow me there. Perhaps," Victoria studied her thoughtfully, "or perhaps you should consider staying and fighting. Fighting for what? I have no army, no weapons, nothing to fight with. You have the truth. You have your own courage and dignity. And whether you choose to acknowledge it or not, you have my brother's devotion." Victoria moved closer, her voice gentling. "Catherine, I have watched Alexander for 5 days now. He is miserable without you. He sits in his study pretending to work while actually staring at nothing. He snaps at his servants, refuses social invitations, barely eats. This is not a man experiencing wounded pride. This is a man in love. Then he will recover once I am gone. Will he? Or will he simply retreat further into that cold isolation he inhabited before he met you?" Victoria gripped Catherine's hands. "And what of you? Will you recover from walking away from the only man who has ever seen you for who you truly are?" Catherine pulled her hands free, wrapping her arms around herself. "I do not have a choice, Lady Victoria. I cannot stay here living on your charity, and I cannot accept what your brother offers. The mathematics are simple. Love is not mathematics, Catherine. Perhaps it should be. Mathematics do not lie." That night, Catherine lay awake in her chamber, Victoria's words echoing in her mind. She thought about Alexander's face when he had told her his feelings were real, about the intensity in his blue eyes when they danced, about the way her heart had seemed to recognize something in him from the very first moment he pulled her from the Severn. She thought about Lydia Fairchild, coldly calculating that love could not pay for silk gowns, and wondered if her own refusal had seemed equally mercenary to Alexander, equally hurtful despite her entirely different motivations. Most of all, she thought about spending the rest of her life in Northumberland, teaching other women's children, growing old in service to a family not her own, never knowing what might have been if she had simply been brave enough to trust what Alexander offered. When dawn broke, Catherine made a decision. She dressed carefully in one of the gowns Victoria had given her, arranged her hair with Lucy's help, and descended to the breakfast room with a sense of purpose she had not felt in days. "I need to speak with the Duke," she told Victoria, who was reading correspondence over her morning chocolate. "Would you send word to him that I request an audience?" Victoria set down her letters with a smile of satisfaction. "I will send word immediately, though I suspect he will be here within the hour, regardless of what message I send." Victoria was correct. Alexander arrived in less than an hour, his appearance suggesting he had not slept well, if at all. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usual immaculate grooming showed signs of haste. He looked, Catherine thought with a pang, like a man at the end of his endurance. "Miss Wexford wishes to speak with you," Victoria informed him, then tactfully withdrew, taking Lucy with her. Catherine and Alexander stood in the drawing room, several feet of carpet and an ocean of unspoken words between them. He waited, silent, his expression carefully neutral. "I owe you an apology," Catherine began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I spoke to you last week out of fear and pride, and in doing so, I hurt you deeply. That was never my intention. Your intentions were to protect me from my own supposed foolishness," Alexander replied, his tone flat. "To make my decisions for me because you deemed yourself better qualified to judge what would make me happy." "Yes," Catherine swallowed hard. "Yes, That is exactly what I did. And your sister helped me understand why that was so hurtful to you. She told me about Lydia Fairchild. Something flickered in Alexander's eyes, quickly suppressed. Victoria had no right to share that story. Perhaps not. But I needed to hear it. Catherine moved closer, drawn by an impulse she could not name. I needed to understand that when I refused to believe your feelings were real, when I insisted I knew better than you what you truly felt, I was repeating Lydia's rejection of you, making you feel, once again, as though your emotions were invalid, your choices foolish. And having reached this understanding, what do you propose to do about it? His voice remained cold, but Catherine could see the tension in his jaw, the careful control he was exerting over his own emotions. I propose to tell you the truth. Catherine closed the remaining distance between them, looking up into his face with all the vulnerability she had been hiding. I refused you because I was terrified that you would come to resent me, that society would destroy you for choosing me, that I would prove to be a burden and an embarrassment. But beneath all those fears was a deeper one. I was terrified that you would realize I am not worth the sacrifice, that I am exactly what Henrietta and others say I am, someone with nothing to offer but need and gratitude. You are none of those things. Alexander's control cracked slightly, emotion bleeding into his voice. How can you not see what I see? Your strength, your courage, your absolute refusal to be diminished by circumstances that would have destroyed most people. Your intelligence, your wit, the way you challenge me instead of simply agreeing with everything I say. You are worth 10 of Henrietta Blackwell, 20 of Lydia Fairchild. Then why do I feel so small? Catherine felt tears welling up despite her best efforts. Why do I feel as though accepting what you offer would be selfish and grasping? Because you have been taught to feel that way. Alexander's hands came up to cup her face, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had begun to fall. Because your family made you believe your worth was measured only in fortune and youth and perfect adherence to their expectations. Because you have spent years being told, implicitly and explicitly, that you are less than others, not enough, undeserving of love or security or happiness. They were not wrong, Catherine whispered. They were entirely wrong. His blue eyes blazed with conviction. You are worth everything, Catherine. Everything. And if you cannot see that yet, then I will simply have to spend the rest of my life showing you. The rest of your life. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. I love you. The words fell between them like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples that would change everything. I have loved you since the moment you woke on that riverbank and looked at me with such fierce determination not to show fear. I loved you when you argued with me about Richardson and Fielding. I loved you when you stood up to Henrietta Blackwell with more dignity and courage than most people possess in a lifetime. I love you, Catherine Wexford, and I am asking you, begging you, to give us a chance. Catherine felt something breaking open inside her chest. Some wall she had built years ago to protect herself from exactly this kind of hope. I love you too, she whispered, the admission both terrifying and liberating. I have been trying not to, trying to convince myself it was impossible. But I love you desperately. Alexander made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob, and then his mouth was on hers, fierce and tender, and absolutely right. Catherine kissed him back with all the passion and longing she had been suppressing, her hands fisting in his coat as though she could anchor herself to this moment, make it real and permanent. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, Catherine. Not because you feel obligated, not because you have no other options, but because you love me and want to spend your life with me. Yes, Catherine said, the word emerging without conscious thought. Then, more firmly, yes, Alexander, I will marry you. He kissed her again, and this time she could feel him smiling against her lips. Thank God. I was prepared to follow you to Northumberland and camp outside the Marquess's estate until you changed your mind. Despite everything, Catherine found herself laughing. That would have caused quite the scandal. I have never particularly cared about scandal. He pulled back slightly, his expression growing more serious. But you do, and I understand that. This will not be easy, Catherine. Society will talk, will speculate about our motives. Some will always believe you are a fortune hunter who manipulated me. Can you bear that? I can bear anything, Catherine replied with newfound certainty, as long as I am with you. Even Henrietta Blackwell's continued efforts to destroy your reputation. Especially that. Let her try her worst. I am done being afraid of gossips and small-minded people who cannot imagine that a duke might actually fall in love with someone based on who she is, rather than what she has. Alexander's smile was brilliant, transforming his usually austere features into something almost boyish. We are going to scandalize half of London and delight the other half. I am counting on it. Catherine rose on her toes to kiss him again, brief and sweet. But Alexander, I will not leave for Northumberland in 5 days. I will send word to the Marquis of Denbury, declining his offer. Good, because I am not letting you out of my sight long enough for you to change your mind and run away again. I am not running anywhere, Catherine assured him. Not anymore. When Victoria and Lucy crept back into the drawing room an hour later, they found Catherine and Alexander seated on the sofa, her hand clasped in his, talking quietly about plans and futures and all the possibilities that stretched ahead of them. Lucy let out a small squeal of delight that she quickly tried to muffle, while Victoria simply smiled with satisfaction. I take it congratulations are in order? Victoria inquired archly. They are. Alexander did not release Catherine's hand as he spoke. Catherine has agreed to become my wife. Finally, Victoria said with feeling. I thought I might have to lock you both in a room together until you sorted yourselves out. That evening, as Catherine prepared for bed with Lucy's assistance, the young maid could barely contain her excitement. Oh, miss, I am so happy for you. To think you will be a duchess. I will still be myself, Lucy, Catherine reminded her gently. A title does not change who I am. No, miss, but it will change how the world treats you. No more Mrs. Pembertons looking down their noses at you. No more Lady Henriettas spreading poison. Lady Henrietta will continue spreading poison, Catherine predicted. But you are right that it will matter less. Alexander does not care what she says, and that is what matters. His Grace loves you truly, miss. Anyone can see that. Lucy's expression grew dreamy. It is like something from a story. The poor young lady rescued from the river by the handsome duke, and they fall in love despite everything. Yes, Catherine agreed softly, thinking of Alexander's face when he had said he loved her, the absolute certainty in his voice. It is rather like a story. Let us hope this one has a happy ending. It will, miss. I just know it will. Alone in the darkness of her chamber, Catherine allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had happened. She was engaged to Alexander Greymore, Duke of Ashbourne. In a few months, she would be his wife, a duchess, mistress of Ashbourne, and all his other properties. It was impossible, absurd, like something from one of those novels Lady Margot had loved. But it was also real. More real than anything Catherine had ever experienced. The challenges ahead would be considerable, society's judgment harsh, the adjustment to such a drastically different life overwhelming at times. But they would face it together, and that made all the difference. Catherine fell asleep with a smile on her face, and Alexander's declaration echoing in her heart. I love you. 3 simple words that had changed everything. The announcement of Catherine and Alexander's engagement appeared in the Times 2 days later, sending shockwaves through London society. Within hours, calling cards began arriving at Victoria's home in alarming numbers. Some brought congratulations, others barely veiled curiosity, and a few open hostility. Catherine was reviewing these cards with Victoria when the butler appeared, his expression distressed. Lady Victoria, there are visitors in the entrance hall demanding to see Miss Wexford. A Mr. and Mrs. Richard Sutton. They refused to depart. Catherine felt the colour drain from her face. Margaret. After 3 years of silence, her sister had suddenly remembered she existed. Shall I have them removed? The butler inquired. No. Catherine rose, drawing on reserves of courage. I will see them. I am coming with you, Alexander stated firmly. He had been breakfasting with them and showed no inclination to leave Catherine's side. Margaret Sutton stood in the entrance hall, examining the elegant surroundings with barely concealed envy. She was 23 now, still beautiful, with fair hair and delicate features. Her husband Richard stood beside her, a prosperous merchant of perhaps 40, whose discomfort was evident. "Catherine." Margaret's voice carried false warmth. "When we heard of your engagement, we simply had to come congratulate you." "Did you?" Catherine kept her voice neutral. "How thoughtful. Though I wonder why you felt the need to force your way past the butler." Margaret's smile faltered. "We were concerned you might not wish to see us, given the unfortunate misunderstandings of the past." "Misunderstandings? Is that what you call abandoning your sister while you lived in comfort with our mother?" "Catherine, please." Richard stepped forward. "We came to heal old wounds. Surely your current happiness renders past difficulties irrelevant." "My happiness has nothing to do with you," Catherine replied coldly. "You played no part in creating it." Margaret's false warmth evaporated. "Do not be foolish, Catherine. You are about to become a duchess. Such a position requires family support. You need us." "She has all the family support she requires." Alexander's voice cut through with icy precision. "Lady Victoria has been a true sister. You, Mrs. Sutton, have been nothing but an absence." Margaret's eyes narrowed as she reassessed her approach. "Your Grace, our family circumstances were difficult after Father's death. Choices had to be made. But surely you can see the value in reconciliation now. It would be unfortunate if family discord became public knowledge." "Is that a threat?" Alexander's tone was cold as steel. "Not at all. Merely an observation. Society does love to gossip about why a woman's own family chose not to maintain contact with her." Victoria interjected sharply. "Please, Mrs. Sutton, attempt such slander. I assure you it will rebound on you far more severely than on Catherine." But Margaret was too angry to heed caution. "Catherine has clearly forgotten where she came from. Forgotten that without our mother's sacrifice, without my successful marriage, she would have been destitute years ago." "Your mother's sacrifice?" Catherine felt 3 years of suppressed anger breaking free. "Mother chose to live with you because it was comfortable. She made that choice knowing it meant abandoning me." "And your successful marriage?" "You stole my fiancé and married him yourself, then acted as though I should be grateful." "Edmund chose me because I was better suited to him," Margaret snapped. "Perhaps, but you never once expressed regret for the pain you caused. When Lady Margot died and I had nowhere to turn, you sent not a word of comfort or offer of assistance." "We had our own concerns," Richard interjected weakly. "The business was struggling." "And yet you are here now," Alexander observed with cutting precision, "when Catherine's marriage might benefit you, when association with the Duke of Ashbourne might open doors for your business, Mr. Sutton, when claiming kinship with a duchess might elevate your social position." How convenient. The accuracy of this was written plainly on both faces. Margaret rallied quickly. "You cannot seriously intend to cut us off. What would people think?" "They would think," Victoria said with devastating calm, "that she has excellent judgment about who deserves her time." Alexander moved forward, his bearing reducing Richard to insignificance. "You are uninvited and unwelcome. You have insulted my betrothed and revealed yourselves to be exactly the grasping opportunists Miss Wexford was wise to distance herself from. You will leave now. If I hear either of you has attempted to spread rumours about Catherine, I will use every resource at my disposal to destroy your reputations and business interests. Do I make myself clear?" Richard had gone pale. "Your Grace, surely there is no need for threats. You came intending to manipulate Catherine through guilt and fear. That constitutes harm. Now leave before I have you removed." Margaret drew herself up with what dignity she could muster. "You will regret this, Catherine. When you discover your Duke is not the fairy tale you imagine, do not come crawling back to us." "I would sooner crawl through broken glass," Catherine replied steadily. "Goodbye, Margaret. Please convey my regards to Mother. She is welcome at my wedding. You and Mr. Sutton are not invited." After they departed, Catherine found herself trembling. Alexander guided her to a chair, kneeling beside her and taking her hands. I am sorry you endured that. Do not be. It needed to happen. Catherine squeezed his hands. I have spent 3 years making excuses for them. Hearing Margaret's true motivations spoken aloud clarified everything. 2 days later, Alexander's private investigator delivered his final report on the bridge collapse. They received him in Alexander's study, Victoria present as well. Mr. Daniels, the investigator, laid documents on the desk with precise movements. Your Grace, my findings are both definitive and disturbing. The bridge was indeed in dangerous disrepair, but this was not simple neglect. Proceed, Alexander commanded. The local magistrate, Mr. Blackwood, received repeated warnings about the bridge's condition. The surveyor submitted 6 reports detailing urgent need for repairs. But no repairs were made because Mr. Blackwood was embezzling the maintenance funds. He opened a document revealing columns of figures. Over 3 years, £800 were allocated for repairs. Mr. Blackwood diverted nearly £600 to his own use through falsified records and bribery. Catherine felt sick. Lady Margot had died because of one man's greed. I want him prosecuted to the fullest extent, Alexander said, controlled rage in his voice. Everyone involved held accountable. I anticipated that response. Mr. Daniels produced another document. I have prepared complete accounting with sworn statements. This should secure convictions. Send copies to the London magistrates and newspapers. I want this made public. I want everyone to know Lady Margot Fenimore died because of criminal negligence. The publication created immediate sensation. The newspapers detailed the corruption enthusiastically. Public opinion about Catherine shifted decisively. She was no longer a suspicious fortune hunter, but a victim of criminal negligence who had lost her only protector. The Duke's rescue was reframed as heroism, his courtship as recognition of her worth despite reduced circumstances. Lady Henrietta Blackwell watched these developments with mounting desperation. For 2 years she had positioned herself as the obvious choice for the Duke's bride. Catherine's sudden engagement demolished those expectations. Desperate, Henrietta made one final catastrophic attempt to separate them. Rumours began circulating that the Duke had made promises to Henrietta before meeting Catherine, that they had an understanding, perhaps a verbal agreement to marry, that Catherine had deliberately inserted herself between them. The whispers might have gained traction, except Henrietta had underestimated how thoroughly Alexander had established his complete lack of interest in her. Lord Hartwell, Alexander's oldest friend, immediately wrote to the Times refuting the rumours. He stated plainly that the Duke had explicitly told him on multiple occasions he had no romantic interest whatsoever in Lady Henrietta and found her persistent courtship unwelcome. Lord and Lady Crawford made similar statements, noting they had observed Henrietta pursuing the Duke with determination while he gave her only polite indifference. Even the Dowager Duchess of Ashbourne emerged from retirement to issue a statement declaring her grandson had never mentioned Henrietta as a potential bride, and any claims otherwise were malicious fabrications. The combined testimonies destroyed Henrietta's credibility. Within days, she went from sympathetic figure to delusional woman, willing to lie to achieve her goals. The final blow came when Richard Sutton approached newspaper editors with supposed evidence of Catherine's unworthiness. But the editors had already received detailed accounts of Margaret and Richard's attempted extortion. Rather than publishing Richard's claims, they published the true story of how Catherine's family had abandoned her, refused help when Lady Margot died, and attempted to exploit her engagement for their own benefit. Public sympathy for Catherine became overwhelming. She was viewed as a woman who had endured tragedy, loss, and betrayal by those who should have protected her. Her engagement was seen as a fairy tale ending to suffering and resilience. You have become something of a sensation, Victoria observed one afternoon, reviewing invitations. Every hostess in London wants you at her event. It is absurd, Catherine said. I am the same person I was 2 months ago. Everything has changed, Alexander corrected. Now society sees you as I have always seen you, someone remarkable. That evening brought one final unexpected development. A letter arrived in handwriting Catherine recognized despite not having seen it in 3 years. Her mother's. Catherine opened it with trembling hands. The letter was brief. My dear Catherine, I have read the newspaper accounts of all that has befallen you. I am ashamed I was not there to support you. Margaret has informed me of her visit and how you received her. I cannot blame you for your anger. We have failed you as family should never fail one another. I do not ask forgiveness, as I am not certain I deserve it, but I would very much like to attend your wedding, if you will permit it. I wish to see you happy, Catherine, even if I have no right to share in that happiness. Your mother, Lydia Wexford. Catherine read it twice, then handed it to Alexander. He scanned it quickly, his expression thoughtful. She sounds genuinely contrite, though words are easy. Actions matter more. What do you think I should do? Catherine asked softly. That is entirely your decision, Victoria said. No one would fault you for refusing her, but if any part of you wishes to give her a chance, this might be the moment. Catherine thought of her mother, remembered the woman she had been before grief and ruin hardened her, remembered small kindnesses, gentle moments, love that had existed before circumstances tore it apart. I will write to her. I will tell her she is welcome at the wedding. But I will also tell her that attendance alone does not restore what was lost. If she truly wishes reconciliation, she will need to prove it through consistent care, not a single appearance at a fashionable event. That seems eminently fair, Alexander approved. Though I confess I am less inclined to be generous. Your mother abandoned you when you needed her most. She did, and I will not forget that. Catherine folded the letter carefully. But I am not Margaret. I will not close doors that might yet lead somewhere worth going, even if I keep my hand on the bolt and my expectations modest. Alexander pulled her close, kissing her temple tenderly. You are far better than they deserve, Catherine. Better than any of them, perhaps. But I am trying to be worthy of you. And you are a man who believes in justice tempered with mercy. I am simply following your example. Then we will make each other better. That seems a fair bargain for a marriage. As evening drew to a close, Catherine reflected on the tumultuous week. Margaret's betrayal revealed, Mr. Blackwood's corruption exposed, Henrietta's schemes demolished, and her mother's tentative olive branch extended. The path to her wedding had been cleared of obstacles, though scars remained. But she was still standing, still moving forward, and she was not alone. That made all the difference. Part 7. The morning of Catherine's originally planned departure to Northumberland dawned clear and bright, the May sunshine streaming through the windows of her borrowed chamber at Victoria's townhouse. Lucy moved about the room with unusual agitation, folding and refolding the same chemise repeatedly. Miss Catherine, are you truly certain about this? Leaving for Northumberland now, after everything that has happened? Catherine sat at the window, watching the street below come to life with morning activity. Merchants opening their shops, servants hurrying about their errands, elegant carriages beginning their rounds of calls and visits, London continuing its eternal dance of commerce and society, indifferent to the turmoil in her heart. I am not certain of anything, Lucy, she admitted quietly. But I cannot stay here indefinitely, living on Lady Victoria's charity, creating scandal through my continued presence. Scandal? Miss, you are engaged to the Duke of Ashbourne. The newspapers have printed nothing but praise for you these past weeks. The whole of London has taken your side against Lady Henrietta and your dreadful sister. Where is the scandal in that? The scandal is in my continued doubt. Catherine turned from the window to face her loyal maid. Lucy, what if I am wrong? What if Alexander's feelings are not what he believes them to be? What if 6 months from now, a year from now, he wakes up and realizes he has tied himself to a woman who brings him nothing but obligations and embarrassment? Lucy set down the chemise with deliberate care and crossed to kneel beside Catherine's chair, taking her hands with the familiarity their shared ordeal had granted. Miss Catherine, I have watched His Grace these past weeks. I have seen how he looks at you when he thinks no one is observing. That is not a man acting from duty or gratitude. That is a man desperately in love. You are a romantic, Lucy. I am a realist, miss. And the reality is that you are afraid. Afraid to believe you deserve happiness. Afraid to trust that love can be real and lasting. Lucy's young face was earnest. But fear is no reason to run away to Northumberland and spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been. Before Catherine could respond, the sound of carriage wheels on the cobblestones below drew her attention back to the window. A magnificent coach had drawn up before the house, the Ashbourne crest gleaming on its door. But it was not Alexander who descended first. Instead, an elderly woman emerged with the assistance of a footman, her bearing so regal that passers-by stopped to stare. "Good heavens!" Lucy breathed, peering over Catherine's shoulder. "Is that the Dowager Duchess?" It was indeed. Catherine had seen Alexander's grandmother only once before, at a distance during a society event. The woman was perhaps 70, but age had not diminished her presence. She wore a gown of deep purple silk, diamonds at her throat and wrists, her silver hair arranged beneath a fashionable bonnet. Everything about her spoke of generations of power and privilege. Alexander descended after her, offering his arm with visible deference. Together they approached the townhouse door, and Catherine felt her heart begin to race. "They have come for me," she whispered. "Then you had better go down and face them, miss." Lucy squeezed her hands once more before releasing them. "And remember, you are Catherine Wexford, daughter of a viscount, survivor of drowning and betrayal and loss. You have nothing to fear from anyone." Victoria was already receiving the visitors when Catherine descended the stairs, her hands trembling slightly despite her best efforts at composure. The Dowager Duchess stood in the entrance hall examining her surroundings, with the assessing gaze of someone accustomed to evaluating everything and everyone. "Grandmother," Alexander was saying, "may I present Miss Catherine Wexford? Catherine, this is my grandmother, the Dowager Duchess of Ashbourne." Catherine sank into her deepest curtsy. "Your Grace, I am honoured. Rise, child. Let me look at you." The Dowager's voice was surprisingly warm despite her formidable appearance. As Catherine straightened, those sharp blue eyes, so similar to Alexander's, studied her face with unsettling intensity. You are not what I expected. I apologize if I disappoint, Your Grace." "Disappoint?" The Dowager's laugh was unexpected, genuine. "My dear girl, I expected some simpering beauty with an eye for my grandson's fortune. Instead, I see a woman with spine and substance. You do not disappoint at all." Alexander moved to Catherine's side, his presence steadying. "Grandmother has come to speak with you, Catherine. I thought, given your plans to depart today, that perhaps her perspective might prove valuable." "Subtle as a brick, my grandson," the Dowager observed dryly. "But he is correct. I have come to speak with you, Miss Wexford. Shall we adjourn somewhere more private?" Victoria gestured toward the drawing room, and soon Catherine found herself seated across from the Dowager Duchess, while Alexander and Victoria withdrew to provide the requested privacy. The elderly woman accepted tea with gracious thanks, then fixed Catherine with that penetrating gaze once more. "My grandson tells me you have doubts about accepting his proposal, that you fear you are not suited to be his duchess, that society will never accept you, that you will prove a burden rather than a partner." The Dowager sipped her tea calmly. "Is this accurate?" "Yes, Your Grace." Catherine saw no point in dissembling with this woman. "Those are my concerns." "Then you are a fool, but at least an honest one." The bluntness of this statement made Catherine blink in surprise. "Let me tell you something of my own history, Miss Wexford. When I was 19 years old, I was the fourth daughter of a baron with a modest estate in Yorkshire. My father had no fortune to speak of. My prospects were limited, and I fully expected to spend my life as a companion to some wealthy widow." Catherine leaned forward despite herself, drawn in by the unexpected confession. "Then I met the Duke of Ashbourne at a country house party. He was 35, recently widowed, with a young son to raise. He was also one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in England." The Dowager's expression softened with memory. "He fell in love with me, improbably and completely. When he proposed, I refused him 3 times. "You refused him?" Catherine could not hide her astonishment. "I did, for all the same reasons you are contemplating refusing my grandson. I was convinced I was too young, too inexperienced, too far beneath him in station. I was certain society would tear us apart. that he would come to regret his choice, that I would fail at being the Duchess he needed. The Dowager set down her teacup with deliberate care. Do you know what he said to me when I refused him the third time? Catherine shook her head, unable to speak. He said, "You speak of what you are not, of what you lack, of what you fear you cannot become. But I am not proposing to the woman you think you should be. I am proposing to the woman you are. That woman is more than enough. She is everything." The Dowager's eyes glistened with unshed tears. He was right, Miss Wexford. I was enough. We had 38 years together before he died, and I never once regretted accepting his proposal. Not when society whispered about my low birth. Not when his family questioned his choice. Not during any of the challenges we faced, because we faced them together. But you were 19, Your Grace. Young and presumably beautiful. I am 27, with no fortune and a family that has publicly rejected me. And you think those things matter more than character, than compatibility, than genuine love? The Dowager leaned forward with surprising intensity. My dear girl, I have watched 3 of my grandchildren make brilliant marriages to people of impeccable breeding and appropriate fortune. 2 of those marriages are miserable unions of convenience. The third is passable at best. Alexander is my youngest grandson, my favourite if I am honest, and I will not see him waste his life on someone appropriate when he has found someone extraordinary. I am not extraordinary, Your Grace. You survived drowning. You rebuilt your life after losing everything. You stood up to that poisonous Henrietta Blackwell with more dignity and strength than most women twice your age could muster. You refused to be manipulated by your own family when they came crawling back, seeking advantage. And most importantly, you made my grandson, who has been cold and closed off for years, smile again, laugh again, feel again. The Dowager reached across to grip Catherine's hands. If that is not extraordinary, Miss Wexford, then I do not know what is. Catherine felt tears burning behind her eyes, threatening to spill over. But what if I fail him? What if I cannot be the Duchess he needs? Then you will learn, as I learned. You will make mistakes, as I made mistakes. And you will have Alexander beside you every step of the way, just as I had my Duke. The Dowager's voice gentled. Love does not require perfection, my dear. It requires courage. The courage to trust, to be vulnerable, to believe that you are worthy of happiness, despite all the voices, internal and external, that tell you otherwise. I do love him, Catherine whispered, the admission breaking free like water from a dam. I love him desperately. But I am so afraid. Fear is natural. Only fools feel no fear. The Dowager released Catherine's hands and sat back. But do not let fear make your decisions for you. That is cowardice. And I do not believe you are a coward, Miss Wexford. The door opened and Alexander entered, his expression anxious. Grandmother, you have had sufficient time to terrify Catherine with family stories. May I speak with her now? You may. The Dowager rose with grace despite her years. Though I believe I have done more to reassure than terrify. Is that not correct, Miss Wexford? Yes, Your Grace. Thank you for everything. Do not thank me yet, child. I expect you to live up to my good opinion of you. But the Dowager's smile was warm as she swept from the room, leaving Catherine alone with Alexander. He crossed to her immediately, kneeling beside her chair as he had done so many times before. My grandmother can be overwhelming. Are you all right? I am better than all right. Catherine touched his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. She told me about your grandfather, about how she refused him 3 times before accepting. Did she? Alexander caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. I wondered if she might share that story. It seemed relevant to our situation. Very relevant. Catherine felt the last of her resistance crumbling like walls before a flood. Alexander, I have been a fool. A frightened, prideful fool. You have been cautious. Understandably so, given all you have endured. No. She shook her head firmly. I have been afraid to believe I deserve happiness. Afraid to trust that someone like you could truly love someone like me. But your grandmother made me see that those fears say more about my wounded pride than about the truth of what we share. Alexander's expression transformed, hope dawning in his blue eyes. "Catherine, are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying yes." The words came out strong and clear, certain in a way Catherine had not felt about anything in years. "Yes, I will marry you, Alexander Greymore. Not because I have no other options, not because I am grateful you saved my life, but because I love you with everything I am. Because you see me as I truly am and love me anyway. Because I cannot imagine spending my life with anyone else." He pulled her into his arms with such force that she gasped, then laughed, then found herself kissing him with all the passion and joy and relief she had been suppressing. When they finally parted, both of them breathless, Alexander pressed his brow to hers as if he needed the contact to steady himself. "Thank God. I was prepared to follow you to Northumberland and lay siege to the Marquess's estate until you changed your mind." "Your grandmother mentioned that possibility as well," Catherine said, laughing through her tears. "You Greymores are apparently very persistent when you want something. Only when we want something worth fighting for." He kissed her again, tender and reverent. "And you, Catherine Wexford, are worth fighting for." The wedding took place 6 weeks later in early June, when London's gardens blazed with roses and the weather proved perfect for the occasion. Catherine had worried about the size and spectacle, but Alexander insisted on a ceremony that honoured both their positions while remaining intimate enough to feel genuine. The ceremony was held at St. George's in Hanover Square, with a modest guest list of 200 rather than the 500 Alexander's grandmother had initially suggested. Victoria stood beside Catherine as matron of honour, her support unwavering throughout the preparations. Lucy, promoted to lady's maid and dressed in new finery, watched from the family pews with tears streaming down her face. Catherine's mother attended, seated in a place of honour despite the years of estrangement. She had written several letters in the weeks following her initial olive branch, tentative attempts at rebuilding connection. Catherine had responded with cautious warmth, not yet ready to fully trust, but willing to allow the possibility of reconciliation. When their eyes met across the church, her mother smiled through tears, and Catherine felt something hard inside her chest soften fractionally. Margaret and Richard Sutton were notably absent, as were most of Catherine's extended family on her father's side. After Richard's crude attempt to force terms and Margaret's silence beside him, Alexander had made it plain they would never again be received under the Greymore name. But the Greymore family filled the pews in abundance. Alexander's cousins and aunts and uncles turning out to welcome the new Duchess into their ranks. Lady Henrietta Blackwell had left London entirely, retreating to her late husband's estate in Cornwall. The scandal of her attempted manipulation had made remaining in society untenable, at least for the present season. As Catherine walked down the aisle on the arm of Alexander's uncle, the Earl of Pembroke, who had graciously agreed to give her away, she caught sight of Alexander waiting at the altar. He was magnificent in formal dress, but it was his expression that made her breath catch. He looked at her as though she were the only person in the world, as though everything and everyone else had faded to insignificance. The ceremony passed in a blur of vows and blessings, of Alexander's steady voice promising to love and cherish her, of her own voice, surprisingly strong, making the same promises in return. When the vicar finally pronounced them husband and wife, when Alexander kissed her before God and witnesses, Catherine felt something settle into place deep inside her. This was right. This was real. This was forever. The wedding breakfast at Ashbourne House was elegant, but not ostentatious, featuring excellent food and better wine and speeches that made Catherine laugh and cry in equal measure. The Dowager Duchess, resplendent in silver silk, stood to toast the happy couple with words that brought the entire assembly to silence. "I have lived 70 years and witnessed many marriages, some born of duty, some of convenience, some of genuine affection, but rarely have I seen what I see between my grandson and his new Duchess. A meeting of true minds and hearts, a love built not on superficial attraction or financial advantage, but on respect, admiration, and deep recognition of each other's worth." The Dowager raised her glass. "To Alexander and Catherine, may they have as many happy years together as I had with my beloved Duke. May they face every challenge with the same courage they have shown in choosing each other. And may they never forget that love is not a fairy tale, but a commitment, renewed each day, to choose each other above all others. The toast was drunk with enthusiasm, and Catherine found herself embracing the dowager afterward, thanking her again for the wisdom that had finally broken through her fear. 17 months later, on a crisp November morning in 1810, Catherine stood on a hillside in Thornbury, overlooking the River Severn. Her condition was evident even through the warm cloak she wore against the autumn chill. She was 6 months pregnant with their first child, and Alexander hovered protectively nearby, constantly concerned about her comfort, despite her repeated assurances that she was perfectly well. Before them stood a new bridge, its stone arches solid and secure, built to standards that would ensure it lasted for generations. A plaque affixed to the central pier bore an inscription, "In memory of Lady Margot Fenimore and all those who have lost their lives to negligence and greed. May we do better." The bridge was only one part of the foundation Catherine had established, using her influence as Duchess of Ashbourne. The Fenimore Foundation worked throughout England to improve road and bridge safety, to hold corrupt officials accountable, to ensure that what had happened at the Severn could never happen again. It had become Catherine's purpose, her way of transforming tragedy into meaningful change. Alexander stood beside her, his arm around her waist, supporting her as they watched the small crowd gathered for the dedication ceremony. Local officials, engineers, and families who had been affected by the old bridge's collapse all stood witness to this moment of transformation. "Your aunt would be proud," Alexander murmured. "You have turned her death into something that will save countless lives." "I hope so." Catherine leaned into his warmth. "She deserved better than to die because someone valued gold over human life. Now, perhaps, others will be spared that fate. Because of you. Because you refused to let grief and anger be the end of the story." Lucy appeared at Catherine's other side, radiant in her own right. She had married Alexander's secretary, Mr. Thomas Brennan, 6 months earlier, in a ceremony Catherine had helped arrange. The young woman now served as Catherine's personal companion and assistant in running the foundation's daily operations. "Your Grace, the mayor is ready to begin the dedication," Lucy informed her. As they moved toward the gathering, Catherine reflected on the impossible journey that had brought her to this moment. From drowning in icy water to standing here as a duchess, pregnant and loved and purposeful. From believing herself worthless to understanding that worth was not measured in fortune or beauty, or adherence to society's narrow expectations, but in courage, compassion, and the willingness to keep moving forward despite fear. The dedication ceremony concluded with the cutting of a ribbon, the first wagons crossing the new bridge to enthusiastic applause. As the crowd began to disperse, Catherine's mother approached hesitantly, having travelled from London specifically for this occasion. "Catherine, my dear, the bridge is magnificent. Lady Margot would be so proud of what you have accomplished in her memory." Their relationship remained tentative, neither woman able to fully forget the years of separation and hurt. But they were trying, awkwardly and imperfectly, to rebuild some connection. It would never be what it might have been, but it was something. And something, Catherine had learned, was better than nothing when it came from genuine effort. That evening, as Catherine and Alexander prepared for bed in their comfortable chamber at the Rose and Crown, the same inn where they had first truly spoken after the accident, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her reflection showed a woman transformed. Not in appearance, though pregnancy had softened her features and brought colour to her cheeks, but in bearing. She stood differently now, carried herself with confidence born of surviving trials and emerging stronger. "What are you thinking?" Alexander asked, coming to stand behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "I am thinking that I almost refused this, all of this. You, our child, this life we are building together. I almost let fear and pride convince me I did not deserve happiness, but you did not refuse. You chose courage instead." He kissed her temple. "That is what matters. Your grandmother's courage, really. She is the one who finally broke through my stubborn pride." "Grandmother has that effect on people," Alexander smiled, "though I suspect you would have come to the same conclusion eventually. You are too intelligent to let fear make your decisions indefinitely. Catherine turned in his arms, looking up into the face she loved more than she had thought possible to love anyone. I am grateful I did not have to find out. I am grateful for every day we have together, for every challenge we face as partners, for everything this marriage has taught me about trust and vulnerability, and the strength that comes from allowing yourself to be loved. As am I. Alexander's expression grew serious. You have made me better, Catherine. Softer where I was hard, more open where I was closed. You have reminded me that power is meant to be used in service of justice, that rank carries responsibilities to those with less, that love is not a weakness, but the greatest strength we possess. They held each other in the firelight, two people who had found each other in the worst of circumstances and forged from tragedy something beautiful and enduring. Outside, the Severn flowed beneath its new bridge, carrying water that sparkled in the moonlight toward the sea. And in that moment, Catherine understood something profound. Life was not a fairy tale where everything worked out perfectly without effort or pain. It was messy and complicated and full of challenges that tested even the strongest bonds. But when two people chose each other every day, when they faced difficulties together with honesty and courage, when they built their love on a foundation of respect and genuine partnership, they could weather any storm. Their child would be born in spring, another new beginning. The foundation would continue its work, saving lives and demanding accountability. The gossips would find new targets eventually, moving on to the next scandal. And through it all, Catherine and Alexander would stand together, Duchess and Duke, partners in every sense that mattered. As Catherine drifted towards sleep that night, secure in Alexander's arms, she offered a silent prayer of gratitude, for survival when she might have drowned, for courage when she might have run, for love when she might have settled for safety, and for the understanding that sometimes the most important thing we can do is trust that we are worthy of the happiness life offers us, even when we cannot quite believe it ourselves.